Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm, and you are watching second and final part of What If Naruto take control of Gotham. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
Clarion looked up to see the shadow of the Dark Knight in front of a full moon, but Batman's words, "You've done more than enough damage for one night, young man," caught him off guard. Batman then leapt from the rooftop and landed just out of arm's reach of the boy, causing the cat on his shoulder to hiss and glare. "You believe you'll stop me?" With his own scowl, Batman leaned forward and said, "Yes?" Clarion sneered, "It's been a while since anyone spoke to me in that manner." "Get used to it," the boy began to chant, his eyes and body both glowing pink. "I'd rather not," he said. Batman let out a loud cry as he felt his body being torn apart from the inside out, followed by a grunt of pain as spikes erupted from his body. "That's why no one talks like that to me," the boy said with a chuckle. Barbara gripped the back of the chair that the elderly Jason Blood was occupying while she watched this through a crystal ball. "You have to do something," she cried in a panic, "he's killing him." Jason told her to relax as he flipped through an old book, found the right page, closed his eyes, and made a diamond shape with his thumbs and middle fingers before chanting quietly, his body glowing just like Clarion's. The pain and the hundreds of spikes that had covered him were gone, and Bruce huffed as he glowed pink. With a gasp, unsure of what to think, Clarion chanted once more and used another spell to transform Batman's arms and legs into tree branches. "Is it appropriate to summon a flock of woodpeckers at this time?" He made a joke with the hero, but the big wooden arm slapped him off his feet. After striking the boy and knocking him 7 feet back and onto his ass, Bruce felt his body return to normal. The boy turned to where Etrigan was demolishing the building and called him over, saying, "No more games, Etrigan. Go and kill Uncle Jason." Clarion pondered, holding his face, "You're getting some help from Uncle Jason." Etrigan's red eyes grew wide and then gloomy, and the demon leapt away without saying anything, following orders. Batman created a huge smokescreen by pulling a lot of smoke pellets from his utility belt. Knowing that Barbara and the waning Jason couldn't compete with Etrigan then, using the cover, he threw a batarang to where he knew the boy was and chased after it. Batman jumped and tackled the boy into a trash can after hearing the clang as his batarang stuck the brand the Clarion had been carrying the entire time. Teakle was flung against a wall before he could grab the brand and leap away. Clarion got up and shook his head, noticing that Batman was holding the brand. "Hey, that's mine." He shouted and rushed over to try to grab the brand, but the man held it over his head like he was playing keep away with a kid. "The witch's evil now undo, make the one from what is two," Batman said, glaring at the jumping boy for a moment before raising his head. Wherever Etrigan and Jason were at the time, the brand began to glow with magic and compelled them to reunite. Teakle hopped back up onto Clarion's shoulder, and Clarion backed away, his nose flaring in rage. "You'll pay for that," he growled, before he picked up the cat. "Look, Teakle, dinner." The cat leapt in Batman's direction, transforming into a human and prepared to attack the man. Batman yelled as he withdrew and slammed the brand's end into the cat's face, creating a dark indentation in its forehead as though it had fallen back. "Sit." Teakle leapt to her feet and sat down, the brand marking her and making her comply. "So you've picked up a few tricks," Clarion growled, his eyes turning dark red. "Well, so have I." Clarion began to shake, everything was falling apart for him, and nothing was going right. A crimson ball formed in the boy's hand before he threw it. Batman began to run after realizing this, stumbling as the explosion exploded behind him. Clarion threw a series of balls at the man, but only one of them managed to catch him and send him tumbling down. Upon witnessing his prey's fall, the boy raised his arms and created the biggest ball of demonic energy he could manage, which was as big as a large medicine ball, before attempting to kill him. A wave of pink, red flame-like energy struck the menacing ball as it drew closer and closer, and after a brief battle, the two attacks exploded violently, sending the young witch flying back as he had been closer. Naruto remarked, as he observed this. He extended his hand to them and took the boy's power before turning away. "Sorry, little witch, but it seems to me that you have just lost your usefulness." He considered killing the boy, but decided against it because he had a suspicion that the boy would be useful in the future. "How are you doing, little witch?" the demon lord hummed, "and thanks for the mansion," before disappearing into the night, leaving Clarion to face his destiny. Naruto sat in what was now known as his throne room and looked at the group of people kneeling in front of him. A week had gone by since Batman had defeated Clarion, and the 3 who had gone to recruit more members to his cult had proven their worth by bringing in 5 new candidates who met the requirements he had set for them. All 5 were homeless, with no family to care for them or even a place to stay, so it was easy for them to accept the blonde as their lord and master. Quickly slipping into the same mindset as the other 5, he gave them a home, food, and something to believe in. He gave them a meaning in life. One prospect went to each cultist to learn and be trained, and they were all brainwashed and cared for within the mansion. Their primary function was to protect the mansion, but since they lacked training and weapons, he would have to come up with a way to change that. The blonde smirked unexpectedly and hummed. It was time for Black Mask to contribute something other than the customary money kickback. After a few days, a teenager wearing a tight black costume with a blue bird-shaped symbol on his chest crouched atop a water tower close to the Gotham dockyard and peered through a night vision scope as some men ran back and forth, checking the area while concealing their guns as much as possible without taking their hands off the trigger. Just as 2 figures joined him, the teenager looked up and turned his head to Euro. It was Batman and Batgirl. "Why are you 2 in this place?" Through his mask, which only covered his eyes, the teenager asked, staring blankly. Batgirl grinned and placed her fists on her hips. "Pre-dawn, dockyards a Euro. Where else would a mask-wearing person be?" The male returned to his scope and said, "This is my gig, I don't need your help," dismissively, causing the girl to frown. "If I did, I would have called," he said. After passing the girl, Batman glanced over the teen's shoulder and asked, "What's going on, Nightwing?" He asked before seeing what the men were doing. "Smugglers. South American gun runners," he informed them, looking around the dockyard. "I've managed to place a bug there a while ago. The pickup crew is late, and I'm just waiting on them to bust him. The only cucumbers in those crates are military grade and explosive," he said. He saw the delivery truck arrive a moment later and said, "And there are the bag boys now." They saw one of the men run over after waving at the driver, only to pause at the window and begin to speak. "Something's up," Batgirl observed. Noticing that the man outside the truck appeared to be becoming agitated, she was correct. The man was beginning to yell and reach for his gun, but the driver held his arm out the open window with a silenced pistol in hand before he could shoulder the weapon. The man's head snapped back, and all they saw was a mist of blood blowing out the back of his skull before it fell like a puppet with its strings cut. "My God!" The girl gasped in shock at the murder that had taken place in front of her. When the door opened, a man with brown hair and a black suit emerged. He approached the body, fired one more round into it just to be safe, and then put a hand by his ear. They watched as, in a matter of seconds, every gunrunner in the dockyard was picked off one by one, with no one noticing until it was too late, and the attackers went unnoticed, leaving only a sudden spray of blood before the victim fell with his neck slit. Now that everyone was dead and there was no sign of an attacker, they turned back to the truck to see that the man with the brown hair had opened the back and let out a group of men and women who began loading the truck or collecting the bodies and dumping them right away. As Nightwing watched the man in the suit control everything, she said, "Looks like the guy in the suit is the one in charge." "I wouldn't count on it," Batman scowled as he turned his head. The 2 men in suits appeared to converse for a moment, but the listening device was too far away for them to hear, and then the leader had one of the crates brought over and the top removed, exposing the numerous assault rifles. The other 2 glanced at the man, but he nodded to where they saw another man wearing a suit and a long overcoat, and he walked over to the truck, where they saw many people bowing quickly before returning to work. "What is he?" the blonde said. "Sir, everything is going smoothly," as he approached after ninja-like killing the other gunrunners. "We'll be ready to depart soon and no one will know what happened here," he said. "Is that so?" hummed Naruto darkly. He pondered. Joseph arched an eyebrow, perplexed. "Pardon me? There is an infestation on these docks. You, bring that crate here," he said cryptically, before calling one of the men over. "Vermin everywhere you look, unseen and watching." Setting it down for his master, the man almost tripped over himself to do so. Although Naruto wasn't much of a shooter, he knew how to use them, so he pulled the slide back and turned to face the water tower the 3 heroes were on. Naruto tore off the top and took out one of the assault rifles, a fully automatic AK-47 with a full clip. With ease, the blonde raised it in one hand, pointed it at them, and then opened fire. "Come on down." As soon as the bullets began to fly, Batman yelled and pulled both young adults back, and the sound of gunfire mixed with the sound some of the bullets made as they whizzed over them or struck the metal water tank below. "How did they discover our presence?" Making herself as small a target as she could, Batgirl yelled. "It doesn't matter. Let's just leave," Nightwing replied, "because one of the crates has a tracker on it. I'll just check on it later." Knowing that, with everything they had just witnessed, they were no match for what must have been an army down there, the 3 fled as the gun stopped firing, having run out of ammunition. After all, there must have been a large number of people down there still in the shadows to have taken all those people down before, right? After leaving the dockyard, the truck hurriedly began to return to the mansion, avoiding most major roads wherever it could. Naruto, who was sitting in the passenger seat, gave the order, "Stop here," which caused the driver to slow down and stop close to an abandoned building. Joseph inquired, "Sir?" unsure of what was happening. Without immediately responding, Naruto exited, directing the man to follow him before making his way to the rear. "Open it," he said. Following orders, the man opened the 2 doors leading to the waiting area where the others were seated. "Each crate is to be checked," Naruto said. "Others were watching, so it makes me wonder as to why they didn't make their move." Joseph whispered, "A tracking beacon?" "Of course." His attendants immediately began inspecting each wooden crate, examining the exterior, removing the lids to examine the interior, and even removing the foam that was used to protect each weapon. One of the servants exclaimed, "I found something," while displaying a tiny, round object with a red light blinking in the middle that was about the size and shape of a quarter. The man hurried to the door and gave it to Joseph, who extended his hand. Joseph looked at the tracker and said, "I'm sorry, sir, I should have known to check." Naruto then took it. "It matters not, just get these back to the mansion and stored away. I will take care of this myself." The blonde leapt 3 stories into the air, landing on the roof of the deserted building and disappearing from view, leaving his people to follow orders while he looked for one of the many stray animals that roamed Gotham. Oddly enough, Naruto easily caught the charcoal black cat with a red collar that was strutting along the rooftops, or rather, it purred with satisfaction as it hopped into his arms, letting him slide the gadget into the inside hem without fussing or attempting to scratch him. This wasn't the first time he had done this. Iruka had attempted to put a tracking seal on him without his knowledge when he was in the academy so that he would be easily located if he skipped class, to the amusement of old man Sarutobi. It worked a couple of times before he had the man chasing after Tora the cat like a young genin. After being humiliated by that stunt, Iruka stopped using them after 3 more attempts and resorted to the more traditional method of tracking him. This method became increasingly difficult over time as he developed his own style of taijutsu because the chunin in charge of taijutsu training was impeding him. He smiled at the thought. Switching this tracker reminded him of some of his more pleasant human memories. He was also reminded of how people discovered that they should never allow him to touch you. When Iruka discovered him eating at the ramen stand, he grabbed him and put him in an armbar, but the boy quickly forced the chunin to the ground. "One would do well to refrain from sneaking up on others," he said, setting the cat on the ledge and letting it scamper away as he broke free from his memories and sensed a presence close by. From the shadows, a female voice said, "Oh, and isn't there a saying about messing with a mother's kittens?" she asked, her voice sharp. When Naruto turned around, he saw a woman leave wearing a solid black bodysuit with a mask covering the top of her head and giving her a cat-like appearance. It encased her body in a tight hug and left no curves exposed. Her lips were dark red, but the rest of her face was covered in pale makeup. He said, "Catwoman, I presume," recognizing the thief only dimly, that and her costume's obviousness. "Now," she hummed, "my reputation comes before me. Considering the fact that you're the only one in Gotham that dresses like a feline, one must be blind or incompetent not figure as to what your name is. Aside from that, I have yet to hear much about your exploits." "I've been out of town." The woman sighed on hearing that. "I leave for a while and the whole town forgets about me," she sighed. "Well, you know my name. What's yours?" she said in a gloomy mutter before turning back to face the blonde. "None of your concern." Catwoman scowled as she studied the suited blonde. "Well, that's not fair. You know me, but I don't know anything about you," she thought. "The fact that you do not know me means that I have yet to make a mistake. The greatest feat of villainy is to be but a face with no name or history to go with it," he thought as he ascended the ledge behind himself. "I do commend you for the act of staying hidden for so long. If I were any other being, then you may have surprised me. I advise you not to try again." The woman gasped and fled to the edge, believing the man had leapt to his death, as he took a step off the building and disappeared from view. Only the cars on the street below caught her attention when she turned to look. Nightwing snarled as he used his motorcycle's tiny monitor to track his beacon throughout the city. 3 hours had passed since the truck had left the dockyards, and he was now attempting to locate it once more. It would occasionally pause in the most odd locations, such as a park, a fish market, or an alleyway. At last, he followed it to a dead-end alley. He walked in with a smaller sensor that would tell him the tracker's location, and parked the bike in the shadows. What the? The tracker was directly beneath him. According to the screen, the tracking beacon fell out when he felt something rubbing his legs and looked down to see a cat rubbing against him and rubbing its collar. Damn it. When Naruto arrived home to the mansion, he saw that half of his followers had unloaded the crates and carried them inside, while the other half were occupied with unpacking and inspecting them under Joseph's supervision. A total of 3 rifle crates, 2 small grenade-filled crates, and 3 more containing rocket launcher Sayuro, or, better yet, RPG Sayuro, were present. A few smaller ones were also present, filled with extra rockets and ammunition boxes. Before all but 3 of them left to go about their regular business around the mansion, Joseph stood nearby with a clipboard and wrote down the number of each item they owned: clean, cook, patrol, etc. whatever. "I was just about to start unpacking everything," the man said, greeting his master with a small bow of the head as the others bowed deeply. "Welcome home, sir," he said. "You know what to do. I will be heading to my rooms," the blonde said with a nod. "Sir, is everything all right? Are you feeling well?" the man asked. Raising an eyebrow, his master rarely visited his bedroom, and when he did, it was usually with one of his women on his arm or over his shoulder. After giving him a quick glance, Naruto said, "I'm fine. Once Sarah finishes, have her sent up as well." "Never mind," the man mused to himself. His master was all right and was behaving normally once more. Naruto stepped out of his designer suit and matching overcoat to reveal his boxer shorts as he entered his room, which was, of course, the master bedroom for obvious reasons. The walk-in closet, which was once filled with the previous owner's clothes but was quickly replaced by his own, was the best feature of the room, which wasn't particularly big. Near the foot of his large 4-poster bed with thick red curtains, there was a large, pricey rug in the middle of the dark, polished hardwood floor. A TV sat on a platform across from the bed, and a dresser was pushed against the far wall near the windows around the room. Paintings were hanging on the walls and a variety of expensive vases were displayed on pedestals, except for the sheets and the fact that Clarion's deceased parents' personal belongings had been discarded and replaced. The room was largely unaltered. Reflecting on his encounter with Catwoman, he entered the private bathroom that led to his room, took off his underwear, and then showered. Although he knew that the woman was a neutral thief who occasionally sided with Batman, she would have been a welcome addition to his ranks. She appeared to be attracted to the Dark Knight as well, and he was aware that this made him a wild card. He would not compel her to serve him as he had done with Black Mask, Scarecrow, or even Biggie's, nor did he need to take such risks just yet. If she were forced to work for him, that thief might expose him too soon, and he still wanted to stay hidden for a little while longer. Keeping villains like Black Mask under control was simple. They were too scared of him and of getting caught by the law, but Catwoman would ask Batman for assistance and expose him. When he returned to his room after taking a shower, a young woman was waiting for him. He dried off and wrapped the towel around his waist. The woman, one of the original 5 who had found him, had short black hair and somewhat pale skin. She sat on her knees beside his bed, her clothes folded neatly beside her, and her large, happy brown eyes gazed at him as her god. He smirked as he gazed at her nude body. "Why, good evening, Sarah," he said, causing the girl to smile. When he approached and stood in front of her, she chirped joyfully and submissively, "Master." She looked up to see his face and exclaimed, "I'm so excited." Before taking off the towel and grasping her head, he smiled and said, "Well then, in that case let's stop wasting time." When dawn came, Batman went back to the Batcave and changed out of his suit, symbolically changing back into Bruce Wayne, while Barbara, who was spending the night with him, did the same in her room. "Good day of crime fighting, sir," Alfred said. "Welcome back, Master Wayne," as he always did. The usual, as they went upstairs to find Barbara waiting, dressed in a robe over her pajamas. The butler said, "I see, well, dinner, or should I say breakfast, is ready for you if you are hungry." Barbara had already begun eating. "Thanks, Alfred." While the butler poured the man a drink, the 2 crime fighters ate wearily. "Oh, and sir, I must inform you that you received a message from your friend Superman in the Justice League. It seems that one of his villains by the name of Livewire is being sent to Gotham for treatment on her condition. Later in the day, this occurs, sir. We've received a report from one of our sources that a superpowered villain by the name of Livewire is being transported into Gotham. From what I could find, she operates in the city of Metropolis, where Superman and his sidekick Supergirl patrol." "Interesting," the brunette thought. "Find out where the transport is and prepare an attack. This girl may prove useful." Not every criminal could operate in the city that Superman guarded, after all. Andrew Shaw, a typical-sized man in a blue police uniform with round glasses covering his face, drove down the interstate with a bored expression on his face while tapping his fingers on the wheel of the specially equipped prisoner transport. "As much money that they put into this, you'd think that they'd put in a radio or something," he said to his prisoner as he absently glanced at a sign that read, "Gotham. 5 miles." When he received no response, the man turned to face the girl through the thick glass window. She was frowning, sitting in a single chair, leaning over, and supporting her chin with her hand while resting her elbow on her knee. "Hey, don't look so down," he laughed. "You should be happy. Only 5 more miles until we reach Gotham. Who knows, by this time today you might be back to normal if you ever were normal." The girl muttered, "Yeah, I love you," to jerk face, as she gave him a bland glance. The girl's leotard, which was dark blue and almost black, covered her arms and upper body before stopping when it reached her rear and womanhood. She wore tight shoes over her legs that appeared to be made of the same material as the upper part. The shoes ended almost 3/4 of the way up her thigh, exposing part of her hips and upper thigh. She had lighter blue gloves on her hands. Her hair was ice blue and spiked up and out towards the back of her head, and her skin was pale white and appeared to be natural rather than makeup appeared. Through the thick glass, she sneered at the man, causing his dark lips to curl in annoyance before lowering her gaze. She was cut off from the outside and unable to charge up because the slits in the walls that allowed her to see out were so tiny that her fingers could hardly pass through them. She jerked and glanced up at the larger window in front of her as the truck abruptly slowed. When a female police officer approached, Andrew slowed to a stop and rolled down his window completely. "Andrew Shaw, Metropolis SCU," the man said, brandishing his badge. "Is there a problem?" "There was a major accident up ahead. Most of the roads are closed for now. You may need to turn back," the woman said, glancing at the ID and badge with a flashlight before nodding to the other two officers who were directing other traffic. Andrew told her, "I have a prisoner that needs to be transported to Gotham for treatment," hoping he wouldn't have to after the lengthy drive, which would likely result in his boss yelling at him. After shining the torch through the glass and glancing briefly at the villain seated in the back, the woman turned back to the driver and said, "Hold on just a minute, I'll see if I can't get you through." "Thank you so much," he said, releasing a breath he was unaware he had been holding. With a concealed smirk, she pulled out her phone and said, "Just let me clear it with my superior, I'll make sure they know you're coming through." She spoke to her boss as she turned and moved a short distance away from the truck. Andrew said to the villain in the back, "Well, then it looks like you're getting fixed anyway. I hope you weren't overly eager to get out." Livewire never looked at the man, just sneered. She said, "Looks like everything is taken care of. The only thing is that the road heading straight through is closed. When you reach the roadblock, turn right and keep going for a few miles through the slums." The officer put down her phone and walked back over. "Wait, what about the rest of the way? I don't know my way around." "Don't worry, when you get to the right street, you'll be close to Gotham. There should be a sign pointing the way." Still a little perplexed, Andrew nodded slowly and said, "Oh, okay then, thanks." "Anytime," she said with a smile as she instructed. The truck turned and began to move. She put the phone back to her ear after it was out of sight and said, "It's done. The truck will be there soon, but I don't think normal guns will help. That thing is armored." She said, a little startled by what she had heard. "I see, well, as long as I'm paid." Andrew sighed, "I have no idea where the hell I am," as he searched the area without finding any signs that would have led him to Gotham. "Why don't you stop and ask for directions?" Livewire sighed cynically in the back. "Shut up," he hissed, glaring back at her. Then, turning back to the nearly deserted road, the man said, "I don't need advice from what the hell is that?" The only other car he had seen was a white van that he had just passed. When the girl heard the man curse, she turned to see what it was. The man was leaning forward and looking up, but she couldn't see much. The man jerked back abruptly, saying, "Holy." A loud boom filled the air as the truck shook and rocked violently. The thick window between the truck's front and rear sections shattered like they were nothing, and Livewire was flung onto the floor and into a wall. The girl groaned and held her head in agony as everything became hazy to her. The thick doors to the back swung open, and the loud bangs they made reverberated through the ringing in her ears as she dimly recognized the smell of smoke and burning metal. Someone grabbed her, and she couldn't fight back. She was pulled out and carried for a brief moment before being settled into a plush seat. Minutes prior to, Joseph and Naruto were waiting for the target in a dim alleyway. "The transport will be here any moment, sir," Joseph said, shutting his phone and turning to face his boss. "Good, and the status of the others?" "Waiting on the rooftops, sir." When he noticed the blue Metropolis police transport approaching them, the blonde hummed and nodded slowly. Naruto could see him looking toward the building where he had one of his men waiting when the truck came to a stop as they passed the white van. Before an RPG slammed into the hood, leaving a trail of white smoke in its wake, the man leapt back and pressed himself into the seat. Naruto remained steadfast as the other man took a step back to steady himself after the explosion, which felt like a hand pressing against their bodies. Shortly after the explosion, the white van's rear doors flew open, and two cultists jumped out with two small tanks and a cutting torch while the other put on goggles and lit the torch. One hurriedly turned on the tanks and began slicing through the bars holding the doors shut. As they quickly dismantled the doors and extinguished the torch, Naruto laughed while one picked up the target and carried her bridal style back to the van. The other carried the two tanks, hoses, and torch back with little trouble. Not even 5 minutes, the blonde thought as the girl was crammed into the van's back seat after the other two boarded. The van quickly took off down the road. Well, one of them was trained in a bit of metal work, said Joseph. He knew exactly how to use a cutting torch before losing his job and home. Let us return home and greet our guest. I'd hate for her to leave before we've had a chance to speak, Naruto said, turning away and beginning to walk into the alley, who then proceeded to the road where a car was waiting. The trip to the mansion didn't take long, but when they arrived, Naruto discovered that his guest had already woken up and was threatening his servants, some of whom were twitching and smoking to indicate that the villain had startled them. He got out of the car and walked calmly across his open front yard to where she was standing in the lush green grass, demanding answers from a man. She grabbed the man by the collar and growled, "Where the hell am I? Tell me now or..." Wearing his typical street clothes, he stood a few yards away with his arms crossed and said, "If you'd kindly release my servant, I may be inclined to give you a few answers." "You're the boss around here?" Livewire asked, looking at him. "Ya don't look like much," as her head shot up at the sound of his voice and she dropped the other man. "You can be sure that I am the boss around here, and I am also the person you have to thank for getting you out of police custody," he shot back evenly, giving the girls a slight flush. "Nor do I look like I have a 9-inch dick, but looks can be deceiving," he said. With her gloved hands on her hips, she hummed, "Oh yeah? And I suppose that you didn't help me bust out just for the hell of it," she said. "You were quite correct. You see, I have connections around here in Gotham, but not as many in other areas. People work for me making sure things are done and so forth. You were one of the first to be brought here to Gotham while I've been here, so I've decided to recruit you." "Recruit me?" she repeated, snorting and laughing briefly. "I don't work for anyone." The girl's eyebrow went up. So did the others, but they quickly learned that I am far kinder as their boss rather than their enemy. "Was that a threat?" Livewire asked, his white eyes narrowing. With a sly smile, Naruto said, "A promise." The blonde abruptly disappeared and then reappeared beside the girl, grabbing her by the neck as electricity arced on her arms. Both of them lit up like the sun when the girl smirked and grabbed his arm, shocking him. Livewire halted, thinking she had won, but he smirked at her once more and shrugged, causing him to gasp. Her eyes widened as the hand tightened around her throat and she began to choke this time. Naruto whispered to the girl, whose face was flushed, "I'd oh so hate to harm such a pretty face," saying, "I'd much rather see a look of orgasmic bliss rather than the look of untold suffering." As he lifted her up, her feet quickly lifted off the ground, kicking and struggling weakly beneath her. "This display is truly unneeded here. I do not really need to end your life. You can rethink your decision and join me. In fact, you may even enjoy being under my banner. All you'll need to do is pass along any information you find to me and do any task I give you. In return, you get to keep your life for one and will be in a position of power once my plans come to order." It goes without saying that the girl was soon free to breathe. She looked at the blonde in a new way and fell to her knees, gasping and coughing loudly, saying, "Yes, master." "You need not call me that if you do not wish to," Naruto said, offering the girl his hand in a gesture of kindness as he helped her up. She stood up slowly and rubbed her neck. "You talk weird," she said after a moment, then mentally slammed herself for all the possible things she could have said. As soon as the lightning stopped, Joseph stopped using his car as cover and trusted that his master could handle the girl, which he did. Naruto also stopped perspiring. His conviction that siding with his master was the best thing he had ever done was further cemented. Barbara sat in the driver's seat of the Batmobile, navigating the city in the enormous vehicle while conversing with Bruce via a tiny dash-mounted video monitor. The whole thing was a setup. Someone made sure that the transport would go that way and they ambushed him. The driver was killed and Livewire was taken. Fragments of the explosive point to an RPG rocket, the same that were stolen from the docks. "Will you be able to handle it on your own? I won't be back in town for at least 48 hours and Nightwing has already left to track down the gunrunner boss." Bruce, dressed in his Batman suit, scowled when he heard that. "I had a bad feeling about this," he muttered darkly before turning to face her. "Don't worry, chances are that Livewire's already on her way back to Metropolis by now. Well, I'm going to see about getting you some special help." A young woman with blue eyes and blonde hair was sitting in a recliner in a very nice apartment in Metropolis. She was drawing a picture on a notepad in her lap and holding her phone to her ear as she spoke on the phone. She was dressed in blue jean overalls with the legs cut high on the thighs and a white t-shirt underneath. She erased a mistake on her photo and said, "Yeah ma, figures that I would be house sitting for Clark the 1 week that Metropolis is dead quiet. So far the biggest thrill's been reading or sorting his mail." The girl sighed as the phone beeped and said, "Oops, that's another call. Talk to you later ma," before bending forward and tapping the call switch button. "Hello, Dullsville Central. Is Clark Kent there?" A cool, dark voice asked over the line. "No, may I ask who's calling?" she said, her eyes narrowing. "A friend. It's critical that he gets this message." "All right, shoot." Her eyes widened a little when the man said, "Livewires escaped in Gotham," and then he grinned and said, "If he wants to get on top of this story then he needs to get there, right away, do you understand?" "Sounds like a cape to me," the blonde asks, smirking. "Who is this?" The line went dead, and the only response she received was a click. She ripped the paper out of her notepad, dropped it on the table, and walked out of the room, letting the picture fall to the floor and revealing a doodle of her flying over the city in her Supergirl outfit. The sentence, "Supergirl saves Metropolis," was underneath, with Gotham written next to it and Metropolis crossed out. The villain scowled and blushed at the name as Naruto grinned and said, "Now that you're all right, I have a task for you, my little lightning bug. There are 2 females here in Gotham. I'm sure you know of them from the news. They're Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn." "Of course I know them," said Livewire. "They're only America's most wanted girls of all time." "Well then you'll be able to recognize them easily. You are to find them and do what you do best. New orders will be sent on a later day, but for now just go find them and have some fun, steal something nice. After what you did for me, how can I say no, baby?" Livewire asked, approaching the blonde and stroking his bare chest. He smirked as his arm slithered around her back and gave her pale, nude butt a playful squeeze. A red-headed, pale-skinned seductress hummed, "Your hyenas have been watering my flowers again," as she peered out the window of a wooden shack overlooking a closed zoo garden that had been closed because of the changing of the seasons. When she saw one of the 2 hyenas hike its leg, she was distracted from her task of potting a small plant on a table in front of the window. The woman turned to her partner, a slender, vivacious girl with 2 blonde ponytails wearing white shorts and a shirt, and grinned at the sight of the animal being kicked by a huge living bush shaped like an elephant. "If they do it one more time they're mulch," she said, carrying a garden towel in one hand as she approached the other girl who was standing on a makeshift balance beam and performing a split. She winced slightly as she slammed the small handheld shovel's pointed end into the wood a foot away from the other girl's hands to show how serious she was. Looking at the other beauty, the blonde said, "Oh come on, Red," pulling her legs in and sitting like a frog. "Give them a break, we're all bored cooped up in here," she said. Harley stood on the beam, performed a flawless backflip, and gracefully landed on the floor as Poison Ivy rolled her eyes and turned back to the window. Harley smiled and struck a little pose before turning to face the corner of the room where all of their clothes were either stacked high, stuffed in a small chest of drawers, or hanging in a trunk that was converted into a tiny closet. Although the entire shack was a respectable size, it wasn't designed to be a place to live originally. It served as a break room and storage space for the groundskeepers who worked there. There were a few tables made of rough, unpolished wood, a small desk by the door, and a cheap miniature refrigerator next to a small kitchenette area. As she searched the trunk, closet, the blonde hummed and then smiled as she took out a lovely red dress that hung just above her knees. "How about we both get all dolled up and go out for a night on the town?" she exclaimed as she ran over to her friend, holding the dress up to her body and modeling it. America's most wanted women on a shopping spree. How cute, Ivy thought, stroking the girl's cheek as the other villain's soft green eyes gazed at her like a mother would a child. Then, as Harley blinked in surprise, Ivy grabbed the girl's hand and pulled the red dress out of her hands, dropping it to the ground behind her. "We have to maintain a low profile and cannot afford to draw Batman's attention until we have some sort of edge," she added in a firm but compassionate tone. "I've told you 1,000 times already." As the other woman spoke, Harley placed her hands behind her back and smiled slightly. However, as she did, the toaster on the nearby counter began to sparkle and dance on the countertop. They both jumped away and covered their faces as huge arcs of electricity erupted from the toaster, turning the room a bright white. A blue-haired villain wearing tight clothing sat on their counter with one leg crossed over the other as the arcs grew larger and formed a single, large shape before curving to the wood next to the toaster and disappearing with a tiny zap or pop. Livewire smirked and said, "Well ladies," before holding up her hand as if to introduce herself, saying, "Meet your edge." Ivy's and Harley's mouths were slightly open as they looked at each other, blinking in shock at the display. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, is it wise to really let that girl go? Oh, I don't mean to disrespect you, but she doesn't have anything to keep her loyal to you. What's to keep her from turning on you later? As of now, nothing holds her to my service aside from the brittle bonds of human lust." Naruto rolled his neck around as he sat in his throne with his servant Sarah massaging his neck and shoulders. He opened his eyes and turned his head slightly, glancing out of the corner of his eye at the man who had become his right-hand man and second in command. He went on coldly, his tone sending chills up the spines of the man standing close and the woman sitting on the armrest and leaning around his back. There is little that she may do to harm me with her betrayal. If she were to do so, then the girl will serve as an example to others, showing them the fate that awaits those who betray me." Joseph bowed slightly at the waist and said, "Of course, sir, I apologize for asking you this." "You need not apologize. Your concerns are valid and you were right to voice them now. Is there anything else you wish to say or perhaps report?" The individual took a moment to breathe deeply. Scarecrow has come out of hiding. The man had decided to keep a low profile and avoided anything major. He has robbed an armored courier not too long ago. It was carrying a few $100,000 to a branch of Gotham's main bank and some jewelry that was supposed to go to a store in the Diamond District. To avoid disturbing the woman who was massaging him and ruining the sensation of her hands stroking his shoulders, Naruto gave a small nod. The Diamond District, Gotham's affluent neighborhood, was primarily populated by upper-middle-class and upper-class establishments. The jewelry was undoubtedly genuine and extremely expensive if the items taken from the courier were intended to be delivered there. "I trust that our friend has decided to share his newfound wealth." His deputy nodded. "The package was delivered to the drop-off and one of your men have already returned with it. I took the liberty of counting and storing the money away in your safe, considering that the armored truck was reported to be carrying a fraction of its daily take when stolen. It seems that Scarecrow wanted to make up for his lack of tributes in the past also. Aside from the $350,000, he also sent you a small collection of silver, gold, and even a few platinum necklaces, bracelets, and rings. He sent them not to make up for his lack of contribution but to save himself from my wrath. His loyalty was the spawn of fear, not his belief." Naruto replied indifferently, "Is that all?" "Not quite. A source has reported that Batman has left Gotham for a while." The demon laughed and said, "Interesting, so my little bat is left all alone in Gotham." "Ah, not exactly, sir. I've been informed by our source within GCPH that the hero known as Supergirl was spotted flying in just hours ago." With a red flash in his eyes, Naruto said, "Supergirl, him, the partner of the legendary Superman, the Man of Steel. This bears looking into." The decision to team up against Livewire by Supergirl and Batgirl, who had previously met, made both of them feel cold because they believed she was working alone as Supergirl flew through the air. Barbara, who was sitting on her back, dismissed it, assuming it was due to the cool air. Supergirl, on the other hand, dismissed it as a sign that she was nervous and hoped she wouldn't accidentally hurt her friend because she had never had someone ride on her back like this before. As they drove Ivy's pink convertible with the license plate, Rosebud, on the back, the three females could not help but notice that their alliance was a little rocky and forced. Harley, conscious of the oddity, disregarded it and questioned Livewire about Metropolis and even her personal life. The entire way there he called her Sparky and failed to notice the girl's intense glare. Upon reaching the shopping center, Harley took a big mallet from while the other two stared deadpan. He went somewhere and came up to the locked door, then swung wildly, hammering away at it. Ivy sighed, her arms crossed, wearing a dark green one-piece skirt, dress, long gloves that exposed her shoulders and long legs, and green shoes that covered her feet. "She tries so hard," Ivy said. Harley's face, the only exposed part of her body, was covered in white face paint while she wore her red and black Harlequin outfit with the two puffballs on her head. "You know what?" she began, forcing Harley to stop her pointless banging. "How about you let me handle that?" "Okay, Cupcake." Livewire scratched her neck before approaching. Then, pushing the clown girl out of the way, she charged up and zapped the door for a minute before it flew off its hinges, letting her and Ivy enter while Harley pouted and got up, pulling her mallet with her. Ivy told the blue-haired girl, "I really like the way you handle your powers," as they walked into the mall's deserted entrance hall. With her face still glum and pouting from the ordeal, Harley used one hand to swing the mallet up and onto her shoulder. Livewire jokingly said, "Oh, stop it, you're going to make me blush." A fat guard sprinted over from around the corner, struggling to pull his pistol from his holster, interrupting them. The man struggled to pull the gun, holding it and cocking the hammer in terror as he faced three attractive but equally dangerous women. Freeze, I mean halt, I mean stop," he said. "You really don't want to hurt Lil Oldest, do you?" Ivy smirked as she walked up to him. Her hips swaying from side to side, she stopped directly in front of the now shaking man and ran her finger along the slide of his gun. The guard's eyes rolled back before he fainted as Ivy kissed her finger sensuously and then gently pressed it to his lips. "An unguarded mall, an unguarded cash machine, who says life's not fair?" Livewire asked, smiling and holding her arms out as she flew a few feet over to a group of ATMs. She turned to face the other girls and gestured to the three machines, asking, "Shall we, babies?" With a sly smile, Ivy approached Livewire to observe her methods. When a few seeds were thrown into a slot, the machine quickly exploded as vines began to grow inside, opening the door and metal face that protected the money. Too messy," Livewire remarked, glancing at the glass and broken metal that now covered the floor. Ivy trailed behind her to the next machine, where she shocked it until money began to shoot out of it like a fire hose. Wham! 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 Both women turned to see Harley using her hammer to pound away at the final ATM. Hey, at least she's consistent, Ivy said, grinning and shrugging as the two exchanged glances. Pick up the cash and load it into the car, she ordered. I'm going shopping, as Livewire zapped the ATM Harley was banging away at, causing the spray of money to throw her back with a yelp. Hey Red, since when did we become the gang? She asked, standing up with an arm full of cash and frowning at the idea of being commanded around like some henchman. Ivy and Harley both scowled as they looked back at the retreating girls. With her ability to transform into electricity, Livewire smiled as she sailed through the mall's enormous array of clothing lines, making it simple to try on an outfit every few seconds. She floated in the air, thinking aloud, what to try on next, with a look of excitement on her face. She heard someone say, how about a prison jumpsuit? Oh, it's only you. I thought that I was in trouble for a minute there. I've fought Superman before, so what makes you think that you got a chance against me? She said, turning to see Supergirl sneering and grinning at her. Smirking, Supergirl said, I'm not the one you should worry about. After raising an eyebrow, Livewire felt a blow to the back of her head. She was swiftly pushed to the ground as a dense cloud of gray engulfed her, preventing her from breathing and even causing her to short out. She tried to say, what the, but all she could do was cough as the gas filled her lungs. Silicate dust completely blocks out electricity, Batgirl said, grinning as she leapt from the rafters. You're grounded, she added. The villain stood and sneered at Batgirl, but the girl ducked and punched back, knocking Livewire out in the process. End of story, Supergirl said as she approached Batgirl and stood beside her, then gave the other a high five. A woman said, sorry, as a big vine stretched out through a hallway. Harley was sitting next to her, carrying two big bags, and Poison Ivy was standing on another of the thick vines. But this is just the first chapter, she said. Batgirl exclaimed, Harley, before turning to face the other and saying, Ivy. Friends of yours? Supergirl asked, her eyes narrowing. Not mine. Supergirl heard this and stepped forward a few paces before Ivy blew a bunch of seeds onto her. What's this? She asked, before they began to grow and encircle her at an unnatural pace. Harley pulled out one of her guns, which had a boxing glove on the end, and shot Batgirl with it as she ran over to try to assist, sending her flying back into an elevator. Ivy went to Supergirl, who was now almost completely encased in the vines, while Harley leapt off the vine and approached the fallen Livewire. The clown girl shouted, Yo Sparky, and gave the girl several slaps on the cheek before getting up and bringing out a water spray bottle. Rise and shine, Sparky, she exclaimed. With what sounded like a thunderclap, a pillar of lightning and a huge flash of light shot into the air as the girl was submerged in the water. As she slowly stood up, Livewire yelled, Are you out of your mind? And grabbed the clown by the neck. After giving it some thought, Harley nodded and grinned broadly. The girl glared and raised her fist before weakly dropping to her knees. Just get me out of her now, she said. Before assisting Livewire to the car, Harley took her by the arm and helped her up while turning back to face Ivy. Ivy smirked as she observed the mass of vines, then scowled as they were ripped to pieces, with plant and vine juice splattering all over the place. She muttered, this could be bad, as Supergirl sped around and slowed down to glare at her. The woman turned to Batgirl, who was still somewhat stunned from being struck by Harley's gun, and grinned. Well then, fire too, she called, before hurling a handful of more seeds and taking off, but Supergirl used her heat vision to destroy them and they flew in her direction, preventing her from getting away. Hissing, You're finished, Ivy, Supergirl grabbed the woman. Oh, I don't think so. Thank you for being so predictable, Supergirl. You see, you just unleashed one of the most dangerous allergenic pollen in the Floral Kingdom. Supergirl used her X-ray vision to look at the elevator and saw Batgirl choking on the smoke cloud created by the seeds she had destroyed. Choosing between Ivy and her friend was simple, so she rushed to assist her, allowing Ivy to leave. Leaving the two heroes behind, Harley quickly drove the car through the glass door, picked her up, and fled. What's up with her? Ivy asked when she noticed Livewire in the back, unconscious and resting on a bag of cash. Sparky shorted out, Harley said, smirking as he looked back. Under the cover of darkness, Supergirl flew the weak redhead directly to Barbara's room window and assisted her in entering her apartment. Barbara asked the girl, who requested to be called Kara in private, to remove the oxygen tank from her bed because she was still having breathing difficulties. She was then able to complete the remaining tasks, Like putting on the mask and other things she had previously been taught. Many of the city's villains had at least one such trick up their sleeve, and they were typically ready for such a thing, so this wasn't the first time she'd been hit by a gas-like attack. Enjoying fine dining and the best wine, the three villains sat at a private table in the Iceberg Lounge, one of Gotham's most popular hangouts, on the upper floor. Looking over her shoulder to where a big iceberg sat in the center of an icy pond with seals swimming around, Harley exclaimed, "Oh, I just love this place. Just look at those seals, Sparky," she said. As the blonde began to mimic the seals by clapping her hands together and barking like one, Livewire's eye twitched. Yeah, she muttered, but she didn't see the seals. "All I see is a lot of water." As Ivy sipped her drink, she wondered, "You were the one that invited us, remember? If you don't like it, then why'd you pick this place?" Ivy's eyes narrowed as Livewire remained silent for a minute while examining her glass. "You did invite us here, didn't you?" "Not exactly," the girl said in a whisper. With a hint of fear in her voice, Ivy got to her feet and glared at the woman. "You set us up," she said, pointing a finger at the girl. "All this was just to hand us over to the cops?" Another voice, that of a man only one of the three women knew, said, "Now that was rather rude. I haven't insulted you and the first thing you call me is a cop?" "I'm hurt," the voice said. While Livewire sipped her wine and Harley and Ivy studied the man, Naruto, dressed in an expensive suit and overcoat, came over. They both saw two more men in the area. One had combed brown hair and wore a plain but nice solid black suit, while the other wore a suit that was noticeably more expensive. Both stood close to the stairs that led to the ground floor, where the other people were seated, and they occasionally looked between the stairs and themselves. Ivy crossed her arms, preparing a few seeds for an assault, and asked, "And who are you?" Harley followed suit, drawing a gun from which a boxing glove is fired. "Hey Sparky, you know this guy? Somewhere." With a slow nod, Livewire said, "Yeah, he's my boss." The two glanced at her and blinked before turning to face the blonde man. Because of her admission, was this man the boss of Livewire? The Livewire? That's the same person who bossed them around a few hours earlier and was brash, rude, and bitchy all around. She is indeed correct. My little lightning bug works for me now. How about we sit down and speak? After all, I was kind enough to rent the entire upper floor of this establishment so that we may meet, Naruto said, grinning at their expressions before approaching even closer. Ivy sat down slowly in the chair across from Harley at the round table and asked, "You had her bring us here?" She moved her chair slightly away from him. "Would you be sitting here had I not?" he asked, nodding. Naruto took off his coat, which the first man brought, and bowed to him. He then drew back the lone chair and took a seat across from Livewire. After a tense but awkward silence, Ivy began, "So, why are we here? What do you want from us?" Speaking to the woman across from him, Naruto hummed and glanced at Harley and Ivy before saying, "You may leave now if you wish, my little lightning bug. I will speak with you later." With a sigh, Livewire got up and walked to the stairs, ignoring the other two villains as she went. As he looked at the departing villain, the man thought, "You must forgive her. She tries to make up for what she lacks in her social life with power and brawn, but certain obstacles prevent her from having many close friends." He was telling the truth. Livewire was formerly Leslie Willis, a well-known WLXL shock jock and radio show host. Even Superman, whom she frequently made fun of, listened to her, as did everyone else in Metropolis. A thunderstorm formed during a celebration of her show's anniversary party concert in Centennial Park. Police attempted to halt the celebrations out of concern for the crowd's safety, but Leslie disregarded them and even incited the crowd against them. The mayhem persisted until Superman showed up, but he was unable to persuade her to cancel the concert. Just like the police, she even took advantage of his appearance to make fun of him in public, but as she was doing so, lightning struck both her and the Man of Steel. After a speedy recovery, she woke up in Metropolis Hospital to find that not only had her once bright red hair turned blue, but her skin had turned white. She also learned that her body was capable of producing and controlling electricity. However, she discovered a devastating truth while using this incredible power. She discovered that, despite her ability to touch others, she was bursting with energy when she attempted to have a physical encounter with her boyfriend, who had remained by her side despite the change. A child sticking their finger in a light socket was analogous to that. Her boyfriend was ecstatic, and let's just say that he broke up with her shortly after. Naruto smirked at the idea. Livewire hadn't had sex since she changed, and it was clear why she had stayed and followed his instructions when he not only dismissed the idea that penetrating her would be like sticking his dick in a circuit breaker, but also proceeded to fuck the shit out of her. The redhead muttered, "We've noticed," as Harley had finally stopped talking. "But you still haven't answered me," she said. "Ah yes, what I want. Where to begin? I'll just get to the point. I want you two to work for me." "What? Both of them blinked. Naruto raised an eyebrow and remarked, I figured that I was being as clear as possible. I really don't know how to be any more direct. No, I mean, why would you want us to work for you, and even then why should we? What's in it for us? Naruto laughed. What a simple question. I wish for you to work for me because I see the potential within you both. As for why, well, I can be a very helpful friend or an enemy that even Batman couldn't protect you from. Ivy stood, her chair slipping back and almost toppling over, and exclaimed, Oh, is that a threat? You seem pretty confident for a certain suit being escorted around, she said. Even though Harley and Ivy were best friends, she knew that if the eco-terror started fighting, she might unintentionally get caught in the crossfire. Harley ept, slowly reclining and making herself a smaller target. He stood up and matched her challenging appearance, saying, My dear, I do not make idle threats. I am merely stating to you that I can be your best friend or worse enemy. Oh, and what makes you think that I'm just some suit? A short, chubby man wearing a tuxedo and a top hat, wearing a monocle, and holding an umbrella approached from the side in an attempt to break up what appeared to be an impending altercation. He said, Sir, madam, please. I run a respectable club here. Now please calm down or I'm going to have to ask you hooligans to leave. The man who was now between Ivy and Naruto caught the attention of all three. The blonde waved the man away from Joseph, who had begun to approach, probably to attack the man who dared to speak to his lord in such a manner. The dark smirk on Naruto's face said, I assure you, I am quite calm. It takes more than a simple misunderstanding to anger or even annoy me. The man began, good, but the blonde man grabbed him by the collar of his tux and kicked him up 2 feet. Knowing that the short man was the Penguin, Naruto snarled as he brought him up to his face and said, But I will not have some diminutive former blackguard such as yourself speaking to me as if you are my better. Penguin commanded the blonde, Put me down this instant. I'll have you arrested for this, so put me down, I say. Put you down. Naruto hummed before grinning broadly at the man. If you say so, but first, let's see just how flightless you penguins are, Naruto said. Ivy and Harley were shocked to see this because they had assumed the man was just a typical wealthy criminal who used money to further his agenda. Their surprise was short-lived, though, as the same blonde threw the heavy-set man over the railing and sent him flying, splashing into the icy water close to the iceberg. Before turning back to face Poison Ivy, who now appeared to be less interested in fighting, Naruto said, Now then, where were we? Ah yes, we had a point to make to each other. Look, Ivy began, genuinely unwilling to engage in combat after witnessing that, we don't want to fight and you've made your point, so just tell me what's in it for us. Penguin was overweight, and it required some strength to lift him with one arm, let alone toss him across the room. Naruto got up and adjusted his clothes. Aside from some slight protection from Gotham City Police, you will also be provided with a place to stay and if needed, some loyal fodder to be used on jobs in return. You will do what I need with your unique powers and we will both be happy. I'll think about it. When the blonde heard this, she laughed and said, Of course, I will give you 24 hours to think about it, so until then have a pleasant day, Ms. Isley. You as well, Dr. Quinzel. The man approached him with his coat and gave it to him. Ms. Isley, Dr. Quinzel, I advise you to leave this establishment while you still can. I'm feared that the building will be undergoing some much-needed renovation in the near future, he said as he walked away. The two heeded the cue and hurried along. Within an hour of their departure, they would learn that the iceberg lounge had caught fire, which triggered the kitchen's gas main and resulted in a massive explosion that killed the cooks and injured a few other employees who had been in the vicinity. Sir, I'm confused, Joseph said as he sat in the rear of Naruto's now downsized limousine. You threatened the others into working for you, but you gave Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn a choice. Yes, and should they choose wrong, well, Gotham won't miss the pair too badly, I suppose. He had no reason to keep the two alive. If they refused to submit to him and work under him, it would be a shame to waste their talents, but he couldn't let them know what they did. He already knew where they were, and even if they moved, he could easily find them and kill them. What about Livewire? Leave her be for now, Naruto hummed lowly. Since the girl had done nothing to raise his doubts about her employment, she had followed instructions and hadn't done anything foolish yet, not yet. And the Penguin? That pathetic little man, he may be of some use to me, what do you think? Joseph blinked. His boss had never really asked for his opinion before. Typically, he would just follow directions and occasionally ask questions. Well, sir, he does run a successful fencing operation that mainly deals with high-end jewelry, artifacts, and paintings, but he has been known to fence other things if the price was right. He also happens to be one who the Bat has yet to stop. If I were the man, I'd be rather frightened to think that someone knew of my dealings with the Batman. Naruto nodded slowly. Knowing from Gull's files that he was aware of this, he then turned to face Joseph and said, Take some people and go talk to him. Let the man know that I hold his life within my grasp. Oswald Chesterfield Cobblepot stood in his now closed club and sighed impatiently, surveying the deserted space. He had already lost count of the number of police officers and detectives who had questioned him in the hours since the tragedy. Although he was genuinely unaware of what had transpired following his earlier assault, he was aware that he had lost some of his best employees. Finally, the detectives had left and stopped questioning him, allowing him to call both his insurance company and one of his own people. He said to the man on the phone, "Yes, I need a crew to clean up this place after the police leave, and a really big bottle of aspirin." And then there was a whooshing noise. He turned and sighed when he saw Supergirl and Batgirl approaching him. "We're closed," he said, shoving them away. "Besides, you're not even old enough to be in here," he added. "Wanna see my ID?" Supergirl growled, grabbing him by the wrist and putting herself in his face. She didn't like that he was trying to keep them from knowing what had happened. Oswald snatched his arm back, ripped the already torn sleeve of his tux further, and glared at the two. "No, I want Batman, Superman, or someone who can do something," he hissed. "Well, like it or not, we're the best you got, so either play with us or give up the game," Batgirl said as she approached him. He muttered in defeat, "Oh, all right," as his glare turned to a frown and he turned to walk around them to the table where he had a telephone next to his umbrella and top hat. "Not that I know anything, mind you," he said, turning to face them sharply and waving his finger. "Of course not," Batgirl said, rolling her eyes. "Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn were here earlier with a young lady named Livewire," Oswald said, picking up his top hat and wiping off some dust. Supergirl interrupted the man and received a glare in return. "They did this?" she asked. "I don't know. Now don't interrupt me anyway." After a while, 3 gentlemen came in and approached them. 2 stayed behind and the other sent Livewire away before talking to the other 2. They seemed about to physically attack each other, so I stepped in to try and stop it from happening. Hooligan threw me into the water and soon left. From what I could find out, if anything, I'd say that it was him. The 2 heroes exchanged glances. "I don't know anything at all about the man who assaulted me, but I hear somethings. Rumors about where our green little vixen and her jaded jester may be hiding." After taking Oswald's information, the 2 departed. Shortly afterward, Oswald heard his door open once more and was confronted by a man with brown hair in a suit, flanked by 4 men in trench coats. "What do you want? Can't you see I'm closed? I'm not in the mood to deal with some upstart thieves looking to offload their stolen wares." As he approached the table where Oswald was waiting, Joseph said slowly, raising an eyebrow, "Upstart thieves? I don't know if I should be insulted or to laugh." The brown-haired man abruptly lifted his leg and slammed his dress shoe heel into the wooden surface, shattering the round table side and sending the umbrella and phone tumbling to the floor. The round man retreated when he saw this and realized how close he was. Oswald demanded, "Who are you people?" as he reached for his umbrella Euro, which was actually a gun disguised to resemble and work like an umbrella. The man grabbed his own pistol after Joseph saw this, but he was unable to stop him. Oswald's startled scream as the umbrella was blasted out of his hand was followed by a single gunshot that reverberated throughout the deserted club. "I wouldn't try that again," the man said, nodding at the 4 trench coat-clad individuals. Each of them opened their coats and aimed an AK-47 at the club owner, who gaped at them. Even if he had some of his own goons by his side, he knew it was a bad idea to fight them because he could see a few grenades on each. "Now," Joseph began, "I came here to speak with you, Mr. Cobblepot. You see, I represent a very powerful man who can make your connections in the criminal underworld turn on you, seeing as we know about you giving information to Batman." Oswald's face turned pale and his eyes widened. His life would be over if word spread about it, because his business associates would turn against him and attempt to have him killed for possibly betraying them. What do you want?" he inquired, now terrified of the people he had collaborated with for his life and safety. "Me? No, it's not what I want, it's what my boss wants." Joseph laughed at the man and smirked as he put away his pistol. "You work for us now," he said. Harley didn't smile and ramble on and on as she usually did, and Poison Ivy sighed as she took a seat across from her. Even the puffballs on her head appeared to droop with her mood. "Hey Red," the blonde said from her seat, her mouth twisted into a tiny frown. "We should have taken that deal," she said. "Maybe you're right," Ivy said, nodding slowly. The door of the police van next to them slammed shut, and both of them winced before the vehicle began to move, taking them to their regular rooms in Arkham. Assuming Livewire would not be returning and would instead be returning with her boss, they had returned to the zoo shortly after midnight and had briefly discussed the agreement they had been given. However, Ivy was informed by her plants a few hours later that they had some unexpected visitors. It goes without saying that they were quickly vanquished because they were no match for either Batgirl or Supergirl, but not before inflicting some of their own harm. Harley used her boxing glove gun to slug Batgirl in the face. and she also used one of her vines to whip Supergirl several times. Not that it matters now, the brunette said. We're going to be locked in Arkham for a while before we can escape again. They both knew that trying to escape now would be futile because the city had spent a lot of money on these vans after several supervillains, including themselves, escaped during transportation. The van kept moving in the direction of their prison. They were perplexed when the van abruptly slowed to a stop because they couldn't have possibly arrived in Arkham in such a short period of time. They heard the front door open and close after the engine stopped. "Now open it," said a voice that was serious and icy. Before the doors locking them in swung open, the two females exchanged puzzled glances while their hands remained cuffed. One of the men standing in the open doorway said, "Good morning, ladies." Although both men were wearing police uniforms, the brown-haired man was holding a pistol to the other man's head. "You'll never get away with this, Thomas," said the other cop. "They'll know it was you since you're the only other officer here." "Officer?" The cop with brown hair laughed. "I'm just borrowing this uniform." The real Thomas decided to take a quick swim with a few 20-pound weights chained around his legs. "Give him my regards." Before spilling like a rag doll, blood sprayed out of the officer's temple. The man holstered the gun and took out a key for the handcuffs as he turned to face the two astonished villains. "Ladies, my name's Joseph," he said, taking the cuffs off their wrists. "My boss sent me to ensure that you did not make it to Arkham." They discovered an abandoned warehouse when an unremarkable black car pulled in. "Now if you would, please get in the car, the boss is waiting for you." Ignoring his servants kneeling in rows below him, Naruto sat on his throne in his manor, meditating. After learning that Batgirl and Supergirl were en route to locate Ivy and Harley, he had just dispatched Joseph to save them from Arkham. He closed one eye and opened it silently to gaze at the group kneeling at his feet and simply enjoying his company in silence had become something of a trend before rising to perform their chores. Or until he sent them away. They would typically do this for an hour or so. He yelled, "Leave me," without opening his eyes, startling the worshippers who hadn't been there for 30 minutes. He was alone in the room as they swiftly dispersed like ants, or so it appeared. He hummed, "You should not infiltrate my home, Talia," and then he opened his eyes to a shadowed corner of the room where the stunning woman with dark hair, dressed in an all-black bodysuit with a silver belt around her waist, stepped out. The woman cooed as she approached slowly, feeling like a mouse being watched by an owl under his sapphire eyes. "But it was so easily, my beloved," she said. He smirked and said, "I must say, my followers will need to be trained soon to stop further infiltration." Naruto hummed, sounding more like a growling lion than anything else. "You entered through the second floor of the East Wing, silently made your way in search of me. When my followers arrived, you followed and made use of the shadows to hide yourself in that very corner 20 minutes ago. You don't like me coming over, beloved." One might have assumed that she felt unloved and unwanted based on his words if it weren't for the slight smirk on her face as she approached him. However, Naruto noticed her expression and realized she understood what he meant. As she settled into his lap and sat sideways, the blonde assured her sincerely, "You will always be welcome here, my dear. Even though I enjoy your visit, I must question as to why you are here," he said. With her arm behind his head, Talia held herself close to him, pressing his face against the black cloth that covered her breasts and resting her cheek against the top of his head. She inhaled deeply, inhaling the smell of his hair, and said, "Father asked me to send you some information that he thought you would find interesting. I haven't had anything to do for some time, so I figured that the message needed a personal touch." Naruto hummed, following suit and inhaling her own aroma of, "You've killed someone," he thought slowly, surrounded by blood, flowers, and almond oil. "Tell me, my dear, did you stay and watch as life bleed from the eyes of your victim, or did you remove the blade and leave?" The girl asked, "What makes you think I stabbed him?" "The smell. You lack the scent of gunpowder and you smell of the oil used to clean your knives." He stopped and sniffed again. "Nymphaea lotus. The water lily. I seem to recall that your room has quite a few decorating it. You extract essential oil from the plant to mix with almond oil, your own personal touch." He said the last part, and she gave a little, unusual squeak as he pinched her ass. "You've watched me closely then, haven't you?" "Naturally, my dear. To answer your question, yes, I stayed and watched. The fool had the gall to make such crude remarks to me at the airport. I waited until he went into the bathroom and slit his throat before watching as he died in a puddle of his own liquids," Talia said, sighing after briefly running her fingers through his hair. Naruto rubbed her back and thigh as she spoke, running his tongue along the side of her throat. "My poor dear, being harassed by the lowly scum of Gotham." She groaned, "Yes. Fools looking at me as only you should." "The information can wait," he thought to the girl as he stood up, causing her to shift and put her legs around him. His fingers continued their little dance across her body, touching her in spots that caused her to pant or moan. Let us get reacquainted back in my room. Harley exclaimed aloud, so this is the boss's place, huh? As she and Ivy exited the rear seat and Joseph, still wearing the police uniform, exited the front. Ivy crossed her arms and muttered, not too bad I guess, observing that a man and a woman were tending to the gardens. They have good taste in landscaping at least, she said. It's the best, exclaimed the man, one of the landscapers, as he was walking by, carrying a big bag of fertilizer on his shoulder. Only the best for the master, he said with a broad smile. At that, Ivy arched an eyebrow, and the two girls exchanged a look. Okay, it wasn't spooky at all. Okay ladies, please follow me, Joseph said as the driver drove away, probably to park the car. They entered the foyer after climbing the front steps, where they were met by miniature statues, paintings, and armored suits, the different items that one might anticipate seeing in a mansion. Even the armor was being dusted by a woman, and a man was using a big brush to scrub the floor in an attempt to remove what appeared to be a blood stain. Where is the boss? Joseph asked the dusting woman as he approached her. With a hint of jealousy, the girl giggled and told him, Master's a bit busy right now, he's entertaining a guest. Everyone flinched when they heard something break and turned to see what it was. When Harley realized that everyone was staring at her, she grimaced and turned to face the broken vase she had accidentally knocked over. Oh oopsie, she said. Really, Harl, Ivy sighed, pressing her palm to her forehead. You've broken something valuable in less than 10 minutes. I'm sorry about that, the girl said, rubbing the back of her head while laughing uneasily. The two villains perspired at the prospect of getting into trouble for it when Joseph said, that was worth 10 grand, in a deadpan manner. Just follow me, he said. The boss is busy right now and breakfast should be served, I'm sure you'd like something to eat. Harley exclaimed, yay, I'm starved, the man turned and said, well, follow me, before turning to face Harley and saying, you keep your hands in your pockets until we're in the dining room. Okay. Ivy followed them after shaking her head. The two cleaners in the foyer exchanged glances before the man returned to his scrubbing. I wonder if Master's going to be mad about that vase? He asked. The girl hummed, I don't know, as she tried to pick it up, but it was such a pretty color too, she said. Smash, Harley. A few seconds later, a little, sorry, reverberated. That sounded expensive, the man sighed, warning. Talia, who had reached her zenith and was enveloped in a cloud of ecstasy that rendered her blind and numb to the outside world, muttered softly as her body trembled, and she spoke incoherently of bliss as she firmly clinched the royal blood-red sheets below. Her muscles jerked wildly, tensing and relaxing on their own. As he lay between his legs, Naruto hummed softly and half smirked, his tongue buried deep within the girl's core as he tasted her deepest parts. He could feel her inner walls pulsing and squeezing around his invading organ. Aside from their intense, steadfast devotion, there was a reason why his female followers were more than happy to be bedded by him. When he pulled his tongue out of her depths, the girl arched her back and gave a half whimper, half groan, but as the whole length of his organ slid across his clit, sending more shocks through her body, she was unable to express her grief. Oh my beloved, she managed to sigh after he was completely gone, and she started kissing him lightly up her lower abdomen and shaved pubic area. I've missed that for so long, she said. His organ was longer than a typical human's should be by nature, and he hummed while circling her belly button with his tongue. Tell me, my dear, tell me what exactly it was that you missed about this. It was a little difficult to think. Oh I missed how you, because his wandering hands and love bites sent a wave of pleasure and pain through her nerves with every little bite. Oh my beloved, I love the feel of your tongue as it forces its way into my very core, oh God. Naruto's eyebrow went up at his touches, and bites caused her to climax once more. Just before she started to rub herself against his palm, he chuckled softly and slipped one hand between her thighs to feel her quivering mound. Please don't tease me, I need you now, Talia cried breathlessly as she reached out to grasp his head, which was now hovering over her heaving breasts. Naruto sat up on his knees after releasing her grip on his head with eyes full of what had once been a want that had turned into her need and her drug. She appeared so helpless beneath him given her current appearance. It is impossible to believe that she was a skilled and well-trained assassin. He positioned her womanhood directly beneath his manhood by shifting her legs so they straddled his waist. Then, he leaned down and briefly kissed her. Ready, my dear? He asked. As he withdrew, she merely shifted her hips so that her slit rubbed the underside of his member without responding. Alongside her gasp at being stretched, he grinned and grabbed hold of himself, holding it at her opening before slowly pushing in with a little, unheard breath of pleasure. As she encircled him with her arms and legs, he pushed forward until all 9 inches were buried to the hilt and remained there as she started to fill the room with her cries of delight. he began to gradually increase the speed of his thrusts, causing the bed to tremble. With her eyes closed, she screamed, "Harder, my beloved, harder," and pushed as hard as she could from beneath him while gripping his shoulders with both hands. He braced himself by pressing his hands against the bed next to her hips and pumping hard into her, watching her chest rise and fall in time with each strong thrust. The sounds of their copulation filled the air, and soon the room smelled of what they had done. Sweat was streaming off their bodies and onto the sheets. When she screamed as her climax hit full force, he felt her walls close in around him and kept hammering down into her. In order to prolong her apex, Talia briefly slowed his thrusts before he resumed his previous speed. She then pulled him down and locked lips with him. He caught her by the hips and held her ass slightly up off the bed while she was well into her third orgasm, excluding the ones he gave her orally. As he got closer to his own orgasm, his thrusts became rougher, slowing down but slamming into her with much more force than before. Talia inhaled deeply as she felt his warm seed shoot deep inside her womb as he entered her with one last thrust. When he first did that, she was taken aback, and after the initial shock subsided, she became enraged at him in a way that seemed to impregnate her. He explained that he had the option to impregnate his chosen partners, which meant that he could fill her up like a balloon with his semen and she would never give birth to his child. This made it easy to stop her from attacking, especially since he still had her pinned to his shaft. "I've yet to finish, my dear," he told her as he removed his member from her depths and lifted her legs, rubbing his hands up and down the toned muscles before he sat up with a smirk. "I truly hope that you don't have much to do tomorrow. I doubt that you'll move at all once I'm finished with you." She pulled him in for another kiss, this time pouring her feelings for him into it and dueling his tongue with hers. She screamed at the novel feeling of him putting her in a new position after he kissed each leg several times before putting them both on his right shoulder and diving in. He held her by each ankle and stretched her legs out as he plowed her after she had come once. She repeatedly arrived and was moved as she tried to assist a little by thrusting back. She lost count of the number of times he moved her before collapsing in the middle of doggy style, her arms too exhausted to sustain her any longer. The blonde, however, was unfazed and proceeded to beat her while lying on top of her. Eventually, he pulled out and busted on her ass cheeks. In her fatigue, she managed to utter, "Oh God, I can't keep on." Her eyes widened as someone poked at the back door. "Rest, my dear, relax and I'll handle everything. After all, it's still early," Naruto said, lowering his head until his mouth was close to her ear. Finish. Before Ivy and Harley showed up, there was an incident between Talia and Naruto. I'm not sure if that's obvious or not. Ivy and Harley were taken aback by the way the servant who was bringing them food treated them. The young, naive man pretended that they were just regular women seated at the table. Additionally, he had catered to their needs, surprising Ivy by bringing her a dish of fruit and vegetables after she had mentioned that she didn't like meat. Harley, however, noticed this and requested a cake, but was met with blank looks from Joseph, Ivy, and the waiter. Ivy turned to Joseph as he returned from changing out of the uniform and into a black suit, and he was eating a piece of toast when the man left to go back to the kitchen. She decided to be courteous to the man who had saved them, even if it had been because his boss had told him to, so she said, "Excuse me," wanting to ask him a question that had been bothering her for a while. "Can I ask you something?" she asked Joseph. Joseph nodded as he gave her a look. Leaning back in the chair, she began, "I noticed that almost everyone around here calls your boss Master. Why? Is he really that great?" Before she could say anything more, a big meat cleaver slammed with a loud thunk into the center of the table in front of her. She didn't mean for it to sound that way. The young man was standing in the kitchen doorway when all three of them turned around. His face had changed from its previous expression to one of a beast. It was difficult to believe that the younger man, who only moments before had appeared to be unthreatening, would now appear capable of setting a school on fire while the children were still inside. "Don't you dare speak that way about the master," he screamed with rage. "You don't even deserve to look upon his greatness." "Alex." The brown-haired man's icy, unyielding voice jolted the other man out of his rage. Since Joseph was Lord Naruto's right-hand man, they respected him greatly and would listen to him without question, except when Naruto spoke. The man tried to say, but was met with a severe glare with his head lowered. Alex said, "Forgive me," in a nearly whispered voice, before turning to head back to the kitchen after glancing between Ivy and Joseph. "Please excuse the boy," Joseph said to the terrified pair as he pulled the blade free from the wood after watching the younger man go. "But I advise you not to say things like that. These people are fervently loyal to the boss and would gladly slit their own throat if he told them to. They also don't mind killing someone who insults him, as you just saw." Harley squeaked as she peered over the edge of the table and said, "He would have killed us?" He nodded and said, "But to answer your question, yes, he is that great." He fingered the sharp edge of the cleaver and thought, "Be grateful that we haven't put a gun in there yet, I doubt that I could have stopped him in time. Ivy did a good job of hiding her own flinch, but the skilled soldier could still see Harley flinch as he lifted the blade and stabbed it into the side of the table beside him. Most of the servants here were outcasts, said Joseph, homeless, jobless, abandoned by society and mankind at large. He saved my life one night after Batman threw me out of a speeding train. I nearly died that night, but he gave me a second chance and I pledged my life and loyalty to him. They both flinched because they had heard from other bad guys that Batman had gone crazy one night and hurt the criminals more than he usually did. It was a little upsetting to learn that the hero had nearly killed someone. With a distant expression in his brown eyes, the man went on. He gave everyone here a second chance, a home. Food. He gave us all something to believe in when no one else would. With a fire blazing in those brown eyes, he turned to face the two and said, "He's more than great. No, he is without equal." Well said. Joseph, Naruto, dressed in just a tank top and some pants, was standing with his arms crossed when the three of them looked up and crossed to the other door. The man exclaimed, startled, "Boss, I didn't hear you come in." "I simply wished to hear what you had to say," Naruto said with a sigh. "I thank you for your kind words, but if I may, I'd like to speak with these two alone." With a nod, the man hurried to become scarce, pausing only long enough to accept the cleaver. After examining the two for a while, Naruto sat down across from them and said, "Well ladies, have you come to a decision?" Standing in the recently constructed greenhouse behind the mansion, Ivy hummed softly to herself while tending to her seedlings with the tenderness and love that only a mother could provide for her offspring. Although it wasn't as big as some of her previous hiding places, it felt cozy and, more importantly, it was hers. 1 month had passed since she decided to join the Blonde, and thus far, she believed it to be the best decision she had ever made. She initially thought he would treat her like a slave or pawn, giving her orders for anything from simple robberies to abduction. However, he had taken her by surprise by telling her to unwind and settle in. To the chagrin of the two landscapers who felt she was stealing their job from their master, she had spent the majority of the first few days outside caring for the gardens. She had the greenhouse built out back specifically for her because she thought their grumblings had been overheard and she wanted to prevent them from breaking and trying to drive a garden trowel into the back of her skull. The sole issue was a euro. The sound of a man screaming caused her head to shoot upward. She went to one of the few places where there was not a window of partially transparent, warped plastic. She winced as she looked out and saw a man clutching his arm, which was broken at the elbow and bent the other way from how it should have been. Her greenhouse's only drawback was that it was constructed directly next to the location where Joseph was training some of Naruto's followers. Although she hadn't yet noticed any trends in their training, the five met and received instruction from the former soldier 5 times a week. They learned tactics, run some drills, and occasionally had target practice a little farther into the woods, away from the greenhouse. He and a few of the other men still didn't trust them, so when she asked one of the 5 men once what they were doing, he ignored her question. However, Joseph clarified that they were preparing to become their master's apostles, whom he called upon to handle any issues. She saw the man grab his wrist and drop to one knee. She was shocked when he snapped the limb back into position while wearing a pained expression. He then got back up, took a deep breath, and assumed his original position. It was heartwarming to see their dedication and desire to excel as their masters. The courage to speak the truth was encouraging. However, she had the thought, what if I ever had to fight someone like that? Although Batman was by far her most formidable opponent to date, she could always use a cunning and low-key maneuver to escape. Perhaps she could put a number of onlookers in danger or something, but what about them? What could she do to someone who is only motivated to carry out their instructions? Even if it means dying, to make their master happy and proud. She knew it then and there. Her new employer, it was forbidden to cross Naruto. She suddenly felt a shiver go up her back. It wasn't cold in Haria Euro, quite the opposite all day long. The sun kept this place warm, and the heat persisted into the night. There was going to be something. She had a gut feeling. As he opened the door and poked his head inside, a man said, "Ms. Isley, Master Naruto needs you in the throne room." As her babies, Bud and Lou, watched with their tails wagging back and forth, Harley entertained herself by balancing on one hand while standing on a miniature 5-foot-long balance beam, wearing socks, a t-shirt, and extremely short shorts. The three had been rolling around in the grass for almost an hour because they were so excited to be taken to the mansion after being abandoned at the closed zoo after she had been arrested. Her socks didn't have enough traction, so she slipped after flipping once and landing on the bare floor next to the beam. Originally a sunroom or solarium near the back of the mansion, the space that had been converted into her playroom, as they called it, was never really used. The windows had been replaced, and the dusty old table, chairs, and curtains had been taken out. Most of the valuable items had been swiftly removed after being broken by yours truly with a thick sheet of plexiglass. And finally, The pricey rug that covered the majority of the floor had been replaced. She now had a climbing rope, a pommel horse for practicing her gymnastics, a small balance beam, and some steel rings hanging from the ceiling. In addition, she had a tiny couch in front of a TV that typically aired cartoons and some games at the arcade to keep her busy. Bud walked over, licked her tanned face, and made his little laugh as Harley landed with a little thud and rubbed her rear. She stopped abruptly, shivered, and frowned as she looked around, her babies whimpering and following suit. One of the anonymous servants who strewned the mansion entered the room as the door opened. "Ms. Quinzel, the master has asked that you meet him in the throne room." Sitting on his throne, deep in thought, Naruto tapped his finger on the armrest and hummed softly using the information that Talia had provided. He had been working on a plan for the past month. It was a warning shot that would give the world's heroes a taste of true power and give them something to be afraid of, not a scheme that involved money or to give him more control over crime. He would need a new follower first, though no, he wasn't a follower, he needed a new student, and Talia helped him find the ideal one. He laughed a little, his eyes reddening as a tiny burst of his demonic strength passed through him. A girl with short violet hair and pale gray skin floated above her bed in a meditative trance, muttering to herself. She was dressed in a long blue hooded cloak that matched her ruffled ankle boots and a long-sleeved leotard-like shirt with blue-black cuffs at her wrists. A round black-red jewel set in a gold plate that matched her red and gold belt was held around her cloak. She only wore the leotard to conceal her femininity because she had nothing else on over her pale gray thighs. Finally, her forehead, exactly where her Ajna chakra was, had a tiny red diamond-shaped gemstone with a black border. As she meditated in her dark, library-like bedroom, the girl kept chanting, "Azareth Metrion Zinthos," softly under her breath. She gasped and suddenly fell to the bed like a stone. She opened her eyes and looked around wildly, but she was by herself. She had briefly thought that Trigon was attempting to enter the realm too soon, but despite his strength and evil, the demonic pulse she sensed was too strong and, dare she say it, too dark. She had a lot of practice using her emotions to control her powers, so she tried to calm herself as soon as she felt her heart pounding to avoid breaking anything. Despite her best efforts, she was unable to control her emotions in time, and the little pedestal that held her most valuable book appeared to blow up, making her wince as the priceless book bounced across the floor before landing a few feet away from her bed. The book had opened in the fall and landed on a page close to the center, showing the legendary nine-tailed fox in all its splendor, and she hurried to her feet and bent down to pick it up. Naruto said, "Good afternoon, ladies," as they entered the room, both dressed in their typical civilian attire. "Hello, Miss N." Ivy and Naruto both started to perspire as Harley responded, wildly waving her hand over her head. Ivy rubbed her forehead and glanced from the man to the blonde woman. "You needed us?" Raising an eyebrow at Harley, Naruto turned to face the other redhead and gave a slow nod, saying, "Yeah, I do. You see, I need your help with a mission that will require the three of us to leave Gotham." "Everyone? What could possibly take all of us?" the redhead repeated, raising an eyebrow, and the man nodded again. The blonde had shown them that he was more than just a typical metahuman crime boss over the past month, so she tried to think of what it was that all three of them needed to do. Whatever it was, it had to be something big, right? After all three of them would be overkill. He smirked and remarked, "It isn't that this task requires our combined power," clearly aware of her thoughts. "Moreover, one would think that you'd jump at the chance to lash out at the one thing Batman can't completely protect," he said. They took notice of this, and the demon's grin widened. "I have no doubts that you've noticed the lack of a certain little bird at the Dark Knight's side," he murmured as he leaned back in the, "Maybe you've heard, but the Boy Wonder has formed his own little team of crime fighters under the moniker of the Teen Titans." Harley nodded slowly after learning that Robin had left while she was imprisoned in Arkham from one of her fellow villains. "Yeah, I heard that Birdboy left after him and Bats had a fight." "Yes, they have established a base of operations in Jump City, but I'm getting off topic. You two will be saving a teenage metahuman from a very enraged creature who wants nothing more than to kill her when we take a private jet to Jump City." "What a minute," Harley said. "I thought we were the bad guys. Why are we saving someone?" the two women said, raising an eyebrow and looking at one another. "And what impact does that have on Birdboy?" "The girl is powerful and lacks not only control but family and friends. I intend to aid her on both fronts," replied Naruto. "And your presence alone will be enough to frighten Robin. Many villains in Jump City are nothing compared to the two of you." "What are you going to do, then?" Naruto grinned. A slender blonde girl ran as fast as she could down the wide stone path in the canyons a few miles outside of Jump City. She could make out the city and the big, T-shaped building perched on an island in the distance, but she chose to ignore it in order to focus on the task at hand. The girl, wearing a pair of blue cargo shorts that ended just above the middle of her thighs and a pair of dusty hiking boots on her feet, had on a tight long-sleeved shirt over her torso, underneath a two-tone black and gray t-shirt that covered only her upper body, and a pair of thick brown leather gloves that covered her hands. Her long, light blonde hair waved back and forth with every step, with a small silver comb keeping the majority out of her face as she ran. Her round face twisted into a terrified gasp as she turned her head and gazed at the pursuing monster with wide baby blue eyes. A huge black scorpion with 6 beady red eyes glared at her from behind her, chasing her down and kicking up a huge cloud of dust in the process. Its pincers snapped menacingly behind her, and its 2 larger limbs could kill her if they ever managed to get a hold of her. She spun her head back around and sprinted on, exerting even more effort as its enormous shadow hung over her, its tail up to attack. The stinger slammed down, barely missing the girl but enough to knock her aside and send her tumbling along the ground. The girl just did move. The girl pushed herself up on her elbow and rubbed her head after landing on her rear, only to discover that her silver comb had fallen off and onto the ground a few feet away. She reached for it, but the stinger almost crushed her arm, so she had to get up and flee, leaving it behind. The big scorpion easily dislodged its tail and pursued. After landing on the canyon floor, Naruto stooped to pick up the silver comb and smirked as he put it in his pocket and turned to face the direction the girl had run. The scorpion slowed to a halt and glared at the blonde teenager as she reached a dead end and turned with her back to the canyon wall. Then she noticed movement to the side and turned to see 5 individuals appear, one of whom was shouting, "Titans go!" The first was Robin, the Teen Titans leader, a shorter teenager in a black and yellow cape, green pants and gloves, and a red vest. A green wolf, Beast Boy, the teenager who could transform into any animal, was standing next to him. Starfire, an alien teenager, was standing next to the green wolf. She had orange skin, wore a purple top and skirt, and had long purple boots that reached her thighs. The blue-cloaked sorceress Raven was floating beside her, and Cyborg, the team's African-American tech expert and self-described game master, was standing across from Robin. A sensual voice hummed, "Not so fast, little boy," and then dense vines grew through the ground beneath the team, enclosing them and preventing them from moving. Looking around, the blonde girl saw Harley Quinn standing next to her, waving wildly, and the notorious Poison Ivy smirking from the other side of the canyon. "Hello, Bird Boy." The cynical jester grinned broadly and screamed. "Hamilton Quinn, Poison Ivy." Robin bit out as he struggled against the thick vines with the rest of the team, who despite their powers or gadgets couldn't break free. "What are you two doing here?" Before a larger plant burst from the ground and revealed itself as a massive Venus flytrap that killed the scorpion in its massive jaws, Ivy hummed and disregarded the question, instead focusing on the scorpion. The clown girl flipped and skipped towards her, threw a handful of powder in the girl's face, causing her to cough and sneeze before fainting, and then she nodded to Harley, allowing another big vine to carry them down to the now frightened girl below. As Harley easily lifted the slender girl onto her shoulder, Ivy remarked, "It's nice to see you again, Bird Boy," but added, "We'll be taking this girl now. She's way too important to be left around you all." "Wait, Ivy." The vine choked the boy when he attempted to scream. "Goodbye, Birdie. We'll take good care of this girl for you," Harley said with a laugh. Naruto watched as 2 of his servants, who were the only people besides the pilot fortunate enough to be given what they considered the honor of accompanying him to Jump City, even if it was only to guard the aircraft and handle the heavy lifting, carefully loaded the scrawny Earth manipulator onto the private jet. The 2 men simply lifted the gurney up the stairs and carried the girl into the plane because she was still unconscious and strapped to it. Standing close by, the 2 queens of crime alternated between watching the blonde crime lord in charge of the plane and the blonde girl being loaded onto it. "Psst, hey Red, what is it, Harl?" Ivy asked, turning to give her whispering friend a fleeting glance. "What is the matter with Twiggy? Twiggy?" The redhead blinked with a questioning gaze. She looked straight at the girl and repeated. Harley gave a nod. "Yes, right there. You recognize the girl. She resembles a twig due to her extreme thinness." "How about her? What is Mr. N looking for in her?" With a shrug, Ivy said, "I don't know." Harl. Naruto, who had heard the 2 despite their whispering, said, "The girl's name is Terra Markov. She now goes by the name Terra and has the ability to control and manipulate the earth in any form, be it solid rock or mud. However, she is unable to control her power and has consequently learned to fear herself." The girl in question was safely inside the aircraft by this point, and Naruto approached it and got ready to board. Harley whispered to Ivy once more, "Wow, Mr. N's got good hearing," as the man vanished into the aircraft. "Indeed I do. Now come along so that we may depart," Naruto said, leaning back and observing them from the door. With their diverse post-defeat depression expressions, the Teen Titans gathered in the living, main operations room at the summit of their tower. Wearing his black and purple costume, Beast Boy, now back in his human form, sat on the half-circle couch in front of the large TV computer monitor, picking bits and pieces of vine out of his elf-like, pointed ears. As she watched Robin type away at the tower's main computer, the orange-skinned redhead known to the world as Starfire appeared to float sadly above the couch, a tiny pout on her face. As she waited for Robin to speak to them about these two well-known female villains, Raven gathered her thoughts on this defeat in silence while seated farther away from the others on the opposite end of the couch. Cyborg complained to himself as he followed his green friend's instructions. Tiny bits of vine had found their way into the tiny crevices of his robotic limbs, providing them with a firm hold on the strong teenager and making it difficult for him to move once he was released. Finally, after deciding to be the bigger man and putting aside his differences, Robin frantically typed away at the computer's keys with practiced speed. He was now retrieving the files he had on both Harley and Ivy. He had already sent Batman a message. "Dude, this is fake." With a finger in his ear, Beast Boy whimpered, "They walked all over us like we were nothing." "Yes," Starfire sighed, lowering her head, "we didn't kick the butt like we usually do." As images and newspaper articles began to appear on the screen, Robin paused his typing. "It's okay, Starfire, we had no idea that they'd be there," he said to the alien girl in a calming voice, or as calm as he could manage. The girl persisted in her grousing, "But we were beaten as if we were truck." "He's right, Starfire," Raven said in her typical monotone, but after knowing for so long that she was depressed, those two were different from anyone we've faced before. To support her claim, an article with the headline, "Gotham's Queens of Crime Strike Again," appeared and flashed, indicating that it was the last image, and beneath it was a long list of stolen goods, the amount of damage they had done to the city that particular night, and the number of people who had been injured because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. "I'm not surprised that you don't know about them, but those two are old enemies from Gotham back when I worked with Batman," the group leader said with a nod. Harley, he told them everything, or, in some cases, he reminded them of the two. "But what I don't understand," he said after concluding the review of the two women, "is what they were doing to her, and why would they kidnap a girl from here? We don't have any information on who the girl was either. There's nothing in the mainframe," Cyborg said, typing on a tiny pad in his forearm while wirelessly connected to the mainframe. "What are you two up to?" Robin asked, slowly turning to glare at the photo of Harley and Ivy. Tara's eyes snapped open, and she sat up quickly, looking around to discover that she was in a well-furnished room without windows, sitting on the softest bed she had felt in years, and covered with warm, cozy blankets that kept her naked but slender body warm. "Hold on, what?" She frantically grabbed the blankets and pulled them closer to her chest to cover her small breasts. She then looked around and saw an older-looking man reading a newspaper at a small round table with a box on top, while a metal cart with a small white sheet covering it stood next to it. She could see that the man had blonde hair that seemed to spike on its own, deep blue eyes that captivated her soul as he slowly closed the newspaper and gazed at her, and a white tank top that hugged his muscular body, all dressed in drab black slacks with matching loafers. When the girl finally realized that the man she had been staring at had noticed her, she flinched. "Good morning, Ms. Tara," Naruto said. "I do hope that you enjoyed your sleep," he said. "Where am I?" she questioned, her voice shaken and fearful. I was abducted by you." "You're in my mansion's basement, of course," he said calmly. "I'm sorry for the way I brought you here, but with your gift, I couldn't be sure you didn't accidentally trigger an earthquake." "With me, what do you want?" With a soothing smile, Naruto said. "You're powerless. I can show you how to, and I promise that I have no malicious intent." Tara pondered for a moment before recalling her attire, which made her heart race as she considered what might have transpired while she was asleep. Helpless, nude, and at the mercy of an unfamiliar man. "Where are my clothes and why am I naked?" With a raised eyebrow, Naruto said, "You were covered in dirt and grime," as he slowly got to his feet. "Surely you don't wish to sleep in filth, and before you panic, I had one of my female servants undress, wash, and tuck you in." As he picked up the box and approached, the girl kept a close eye on him. "Here are some clean clothes for you to wear, on the cart is some food. I shall take my leave now, so once you have your fill, talk to the lady waiting outside and she will take you to me so that we may talk about your training." She opened her box and gasped when she saw her silver comb hair ornament after watching him leave with a bewildered expression on her face. Just as he was leaving the room, Tara glanced at the back of the retreating blonde and smiled slightly in gratitude. Naruto and Tara had been training in the open clearing in the middle of the woods behind the mansion. Tara coughed, spitting on the dirt beneath her as sweat trickled from the tip of her nose, and she wheezed on her hands and knees, raising her free hand to support her torso, which screamed in agony and adhered to her slender frame because of the perspiration. She slowly looked up to see the blonde man, who was putting her through this torture called training, staring down at her with his arms crossed and not even sweating or amused. She said in a low voice, "I can't do it," as tears of anguish and shame began to well up in her eyes. "Unacceptable," the icy voice said, echoing in her head like a drill biting into her skull. "I will not tolerate weakness, and no student of mine will be regarded as a failure once more." As her hands started to glow yellow, she tensed her entire body and clenched her eyes at his cruelty, throwing her hands forward and glaring at the man with her solid glowing yellow eyes while screaming loudly. Just a few feet in front of the girl, a big spike of solid stone erupted from the ground. She immediately stood up and followed it, her fist raised, intending to surprise him with a two-pronged attack, using the first as a diversion. When Naruto saw this, he stepped around the stone and grabbed her fist in his open palm. He then drew the girl to him and kicked her feet out from under her with a quick kick to the front of her ankles, enclosing the gloved fist in his own. He put a knee in her lower back, pulled her arm around to almost touch her other shoulder blade, and started to force it upward, causing Tara to gasp as she fell onto her face and scream in agony. She attempted to throw him off in vain, but stopped when she heard a tiny pop coming from her shoulder, causing her joint to pop out of its socket, causing her to scream. After huffing and glancing down at the sobbing girl, Naruto silently let go of her fist and got to her feet. Tara was suddenly free and rolled onto her back, clutching her shoulder in agony as tears streamed down her face. He knelt back down and sighed silently as he watched his student sob. "Hush yourself," he said, sitting her up and drawing her to his chest, ignoring the perspiration on her back that began to seep into his tank top. He then gently pushed her head aside and examined her dislocated shoulder. The girl kept her eyes closed and winced as he pulled her hand away from the dislocation and held onto her small shoulder with his hand. Tara was certain that this would be a beautiful moment between them and a turn on for her if it weren't for the pain and the fact that he was the one causing it. As his hand turned red, he whispered, "Shush," into her ear, causing her to lean closer to him than before as the pain subsided. It didn't last long, though, because he abruptly snapped her joint back into place, causing the teenager to scream in agony once more before rolling off of him and onto the ground as though he had been on fire. She groaned briefly from phantom pains and looked up at him with unspoken hatred burning behind her blue eyes as he got to his feet. "You don't have to say it," the demon thought casually. "I can tell you despise me. It's written in your eyes and on your face. Tell me, would you try to end me if you had the chance?" "I'd grind you into dust," she hissed, putting as much anger as she could manage into her words. "I'd slowly and painfully crush you until nothing but dust was left if I could." She merely glared more intensely from her spot on the ground. "Is that so?" After giving a nod, Tara bit out, "I hated you." "What's the reason for that? Stop playing the innocent. You know exactly why," she snapped. "For the past month, all you've done is force me to meditate before beating me to the ground, despite your promise to help me take control of my abilities." "So," he hummed, "do you think this is a pointless endeavor?" He shrugged as she glared. "So be it." He threw it at her like a spear, and the girl screamed as he held it out her arms instinctively, waiting for a painful death, but the blonde had disappeared in a flash, grabbing the trunk of a fully grown adult tree and tearing it from the ground, holding it above his head with ease. She heard a crumbling sound, and to her surprise, 10 stone spears protruded from the ground, supporting the tree 5 feet away from her and 6 feet above the ground. She gazed at the tree in wonder. She had wanted to defend herself and managed to do so on her own. She turned to face the other blonde, who was grinning at her as he approached to stop beside her while she was still sitting on the dirt. "Now do you realize that there were benefits to what I endured for you? I had you meditate to create a new connection to your inner power because you have been repressing it out of fear until you do it automatically and without conscious thought. As for these beatings, as you describe them, you seem to have forgotten that I've been teaching you the right techniques and that fighting is the only way to truly experience things. The enemy would not be so nice if this were a real battle, so be thankful that I heal you and let you rest at the conclusion of each one. You also can't argue that before, you had to concentrate and force the earth to bend to your will," he said, glancing over at the 10 incredibly sharp spears of stone that had sliced through the tree like a hot blade through flesh. "But now you act instinctively." When the girl accepted Naruto's extended hand, he helped her stand up and said, "It is late, let's return to the mansion." As 2 more months went by, Tara was unable to deny that not only was her life improving overall, but that she was also improving her powers. She had been living in different cities for years, sometimes trying to be a hero and use her gift for good, but frequently ruining it when she lost control. She barely had anything to eat while she was drifting, finding little work to buy food other than scraps and bits from the trash, but aside from that, she would say that the worst thing was that she had no friends, no one to confide in, and felt as though she couldn't relate to anyone. Now she had a place to live, and a mansion at that. She was provided with 3 delectable meals a day, clean clothes to wear, and a whole mansion of people to confide in if she ever needed to talk to someone. When he first began training her, Joseph, the stoic, brown-haired former soldier, always treated her well. He taught her hand-to-hand combat and even how to shoot a handgun, claiming that she wouldn't be given an assault rifle because of her size. She also noticed that Naruto's teaching style was more hands-on and painfully real, whereas Joseph would slowly demonstrate and let her practice. Although it wasn't painful, she had to admit that she learned much more quickly with Naruto's hands-on method. After a while, Ivy became Terra's primary confidant, aside from Naruto, to whom she could turn if she needed advice. Ivy tended to keep to herself, never really reaching out to the younger teen but not rejecting her when she had questions, mainly things with female issues. They did have some issues at first, mostly with Harley's propensity to give people nicknames, but Twiggy soon overcame them. Harley was a friend, sort of. Terra enjoyed hanging out with her fellow blonde, but she soon learned not to relax because Harley enjoyed pulling practical jokes, which in turn led to Terra getting revenge and starting a cycle of pranks that left the cleaners in a fit as they had to clean up the aftermath. Nevertheless, nothing a Euro, not even training, conversation, food, clothing, pranks, or anything else a Euro, could have prepared her for what she had just seen. She had asked Naruto to advance her training because she felt that she had become very skilled at what they were doing with it, and he had nodded and looked into her eyes before they left the mansion and entered the city of Gotham. How stupid of her. As he guided her down a dim alleyway in the most dangerous area of Gotham, which is notorious for rape, murder, and mugging, Naruto pondered, "You want to continue your training? We'll see if you're prepared to do what is required," he said. Naruto briefly disappeared from her view as he turned the corner of the alley, but she froze as she turned to follow him just seconds later. Naruto had left. She frantically looked around for her teacher, but as a cold blade touched her throat, she stiffened. "What do we have here, then?" From behind me, a greasy, rat-like voice pondered, "Don't you realize, little girl, that if you wish to use my alley, yours is mine to use?" Despite her training, Terra was unable to force herself to react and fight when a hand groped at her chest, causing her to start shaking. Unexpectedly, the hand that was roughly twisting and pulling at her hair went limp, and she froze as a hand erupted from the rapist's torso. The man then turned her and roughly slammed her back into the wall before ripping off her white t-shirt and bringing her to her knees by grabbing her long blonde hair. With his other hand dripping blood and gore, Naruto grabbed the man by the throat from behind. A wet splat told him that the would-be rapist's intestines had fallen out, and he tore his arm out again before letting the body fall with a thump as the skull struck the cement floor. "Until you can murder without hesitation, you will never be ready." Terra simply gaped at the corpse. You simply killed him." One nod, "Indeed I did," said Naruto. "However, you weren't required to, like many would-be heroes." She continued to believe that killing was always an option. "Kill him," she said. The demon thought, "Maybe not, but do you think he would have stopped what he does if I hadn't? This guy is a real monster in human form. He has sexually assaulted numerous women and even young children, and he takes pleasure in seeing their writhing as he cruelly abuses them. It didn't matter if they were boys or girls as long as they were really, very young," he said icily, making her feel worse and worse. He's had strong friends to protect him, and the so-called heroes let petty people like this go free to hurt the people who admire them. This, when he finished with his young victims, he enjoyed taking that exact knife and carefully sticking it to Euro. This was kind of his calling card. "Quit it!" the girl screamed, not wanting to hear any more of that as she started to cry. "Just stop." This man had been his target for some time, so Naruto hummed but refrained from telling his story. This was not only a good business deal, but also a good way to teach Terra that some people had to die. "Sir, I'm here with the usual report on my training with Miss Terra." Naruto nodded after glancing at Joseph. "The girl has shown remarkable improvement from her first training session, as requested. I've trained her in how to use a firearm and she shows a talent for them. She'll need to keep practicing of course, but that's to be expected." Although she nodded slowly, the blonde didn't appear to be listening very intently. "Mister, are you thinking about something?" Naruto hummed as he looked at the man. "The girl saw her first kill not long ago. However, I don't think it's good enough. Her first kill should come sooner rather than later, in my opinion." "Sir, what do you recommend?" "Joseph. Biggies has outlived his usefulness. Gather the apostles and the girl. I want you to personally go and oversee the operation. Wipe out Biggies and his men," the blonde said with a sly smile after giving it some serious thought. "Instead, have the girl kill Biggies." "How about the employees? people have been abducted by biggies to work in the mines. For a brief moment, the blonde said, no witnesses are to be left, no one shall know what happened there. It's easy to shoot a man in the back while he's running or to fire from a distance. The real test isn't simply killing, no, it's seeing every expression he makes, ignoring his pleas, listening to his prayers, and watching him realize that he's going to die. Murder is a simple act that anyone can perform, young or old, man or woman. Tara's arm trembled as she aimed a handgun barrel at the head of a filthy jerk who weighed more than 400 pounds and begged her not to shoot. Biggis's shack had been spared from destruction at first, but after they had looted it for everything it was worth, they set it on fire. The mining camp had been destroyed all around her, and the guard towers and the shacks where the prisoners were housed had been destroyed by an RPG. It was shocking to see that 5 men had taken over the camp of more than 30 miners and 25 armed guards without a single wound to show for their efforts. But she hadn't witnessed everything because the 5 apostles had already taken control of the camp in a big transport truck before they arrived by helicopter. Joseph said, Miss Tara, from her side, is something wrong? The girl shook her head and looked at the man. Well then, shoot him. Please, he pleaded, tensing up, please don't. As her finger gradually teased the trigger, her hand tightened its hold. Biggis's final words were, please, before his brain matter was sprayed across the sands behind him by a hollow point. After a moment of holding the gun up while continuing to aim at the spot, Tara dropped the pistol and covered her mouth in shock at what she had just done. The boss will be proud of you, Joseph said to the still horrified teenager as he knelt down and picked up the pistol, wiping the sand off its sides and holstering it under his suit coat. You did a good job, Miss Tara, he said. She felt a little beher after hearing that, for some reason. Now, wait for me in the helicopter and we'll head back to the airport, the man said, turning her to face the waiting helicopter. I have to speak with the apostles immediately. She followed his instructions and nodded, leaning close to one of the apostles who were waiting. Joseph said, load the truck with the guns, money, and the raw ore they have mined, then kill them all. Sir, even the miners? The man asked, seeking verification. While nodding, Joseph said, Lord Naruto's orders. Immediately, sir. The little homeless metahuman named Tara was dead, and in her wake was his little killer. Tara. Naruto laughed ominously from his throne, having just received a report from Joseph that his little apprentice had committed her first murder. 3 months had shaped her into a killer. A reluctant one, but a killer nonetheless. And he would soon have her even more twisted. Special effect. The left side of Tara's face overlaps Naruto's as the screen focuses on his smirking face. Special effect. The scene switches from black to Tara standing in front of her master back at the mansion. The scene starts with Tara looking out the plane window as they fly back to Gotham. With a haunted look on her face, she leans back into the seat and closes her eyes as everything except her fades to black. When she opens her eyes again, the innocent, haunted spark in her eyes has been replaced with a cold, uncaring glint. With a faint smile, Naruto informed her, your training is complete. I can no longer teach you to control your gift. You have changed a lot in the 6 months that you have been here, and I am proud to call you my student, he said. I'm grateful, Master. He was her hero, her role model, and she corrected herself. Naruto, since he had previously instructed her to address him by his name. Thank you for everything. If it wasn't for you. She trailed off, considering the possible outcomes of her life if he hadn't brought her in. The law of mankind no longer mattered to her. The only law that mattered to her and the others was his word. Naruto grinned. She had been so easily manipulated and shaped into the ideal vassal. Her conscience had been crushed. Her morals no longer burdened her, and the act of murder now held no significance. Tara, he said, interrupting her reverie, it is time for you to take your proper place. You have received more than enough training, and you are now prepared to serve as my evangelist. Joseph was the only other person to become Naruto's evangelist, which essentially meant that he saw them as his right-hand mana. Or, in her case, his left-hand woman. While his hand started to glow crimson, the girl nodded and knelt down, looking into each other's eyes as he touched her forehead with a glowing finger. Despite the excruciating pain that ran through her entire body, she never looked away from his gaze while gritting her teeth. Unnoticed because of her shirt, a demonic symbol permanently marked her as his, burning itself into her back before fading. He finished marking her after what seemed like hours, then took his finger off of her, letting her fall and catch herself on her hands while gasping the first audible sign of pain she had made. Get up, my love, because it's time to show yourself to me and the world. Sort of. She stood up on wobbly knees and said, what's the plan? We defeat the Teen Titans. Naruto grinned. Not much of a challenge, the girl said, grinning back at him. And that, my dear, is what the world will soon know. As they drove down the road, All of the Teen Titans sat in Cyborg's specially designed car, which was as high-tech as he was, and listened to Beast Boy try to make jokes as usual. They weren't very funny, and Starfire was more confused than anything else, while the others just shook their heads at every poor joke. They all started to perspire as he stopped at a stoplight and attempted to make a joke once more this time. He asked why ducks were so funny and replied, because they were always quacking jokes. The five screamed at the sudden impact that caused the car to flip, roll on its side twice, and land right side up in the middle of the surprisingly empty streets. Cyborg slammed on the gas to speed up when the light changed, and just as they reached the center of the intersection, a big boulder the size of a smaller car slammed into the driver's side. Starfire was able to step out and rub her head as the back driver's side door blew off and skidded across the street after the entire car was engulfed in a green orb. Cyborg winced as it fell off after opening his door and stepping outside. When the others exited the vehicle and turned to see where the boulder had come from, they saw the same blonde girl who had been abducted by Ivy and Harley 6 months prior, but she had changed greatly in appearance. She wore tight black cargo pants that hugged her still slender but developing hips, a shirt that appeared to be made of fishnet, and a blood-red sports bra that exposed her belly. Her hair was still long and partially covered her right eye. However, it was her weapons that caught their attention, not her attire. She wore a pair of fingerless gloves with a metal plate in the shape of knuckles over her real knuckles to give her punches an extra boost, and finally, from what they could see, hanging at her sides, slightly angled out, were a pair of knives. They weren't sure what kind they were because they were partially hidden behind her back, but they were dangerous anyhow. She also had a wide tactical belt around her waist with a few different pouches on random places, and another strap attached to a holster that clipped around her thigh. With her hands glowing yellow and tiny, sharp pieces of asphalt flying from the street like bullets, the girl smirked and attacked them without saying a word. Beast Boy ran to the side and leapt behind the boulder that had initially struck the car. Robin launched his grappling hook and pulled himself to safety. Starfire and Raven flew out of the way, and finally, Cyborg ran after Beast Boy. Unrelentingly, the shards pounded into the vehicle, bending the reinforced roof support, shattering the driver's side tires, piercing the already broken front glass and denting panels. Beast Boy was leaning against the boulder, holding his arms over his head, when all of a sudden his cover vanished. He fell onto his back, gaping as it crashed into the car with enough force to cause it to explode, and then he turned to see the girl smirk and levitate the ground beneath her, providing her with a floating platform. "Titan, go," said Robin as he landed on the street, and the other Titans followed. He called, but was abruptly interrupted by someone putting the bottom of a boot to his face. The new enemy punched the Green Titan in the mouth, then picked him up and threw Beast Boy into Raven as Robin flew back, slamming into Cyborg. Starfire, distracted, had not noticed the big rock flying her way until it slammed her into the ground, so she charged up a starbolt and threw it at the man, only to gape as it was slapped aside with a backhand, shattering a 6th-story window of an adjacent building. The blonde man hummed, wearing a short-sleeved fishnet shirt with a white tank top over it, black pants, and boots. He was dressed similarly to the other blonde, but unlike Terra, he had a half-face mask attached to his shirt instead of any weapons, much like Kakashi's. With a sly smile, Naruto turned and walked slowly to Terra, who was standing on the floating rock. He then leapt up beside her. The girl smiled at her master and said, "Just like I said, no problem at all." Beast Boy sat up, rubbed his face, and moaned softly. "Ow, I feel like I just got hit by a truck," he said. Raven snarled as the green beam sat on her back. "Beast Boy, if you don't get off me, I'm going to hit you with a truck," coming from beneath him. Beast Boy rushed to his feet and apologized as the cloaked girl rose and floated a few feet off the ground, frowning disapprovingly. "That hurt my Grebnik," Starfire muttered as she rubbed her butt through her purple skirt after rolling the boulder off of her. Soon after, the team reassembled and made another attempt to attack the pair. Looking at Terra, Naruto arched an eyebrow and said, "Want to demonstrate your newfound knowledge for me?" The girl grinned and her eyes turned yellow once more. "With pleasure," she said. Terra created a huge hole in the ground as the Teen Titans charged them from the front, and when the teen saw it, he attempted to jump over it, but a huge column shot up quickly and nailed him in the crotch, sending him hurtling upwards with tears streaming from beneath his mask. The blonde man took a step right behind the girl as his cannon cleaved a large chunk off the side. Cyborg turned his head, flinched as his friend crashed into the road, and powered up his arm into his built-in sonic cannon, shooting the beam at the two. Before racing toward them on the rock, Terra scowled and threw a piece of her platform at the cyborg. Beast Boy almost got hit by the rock as it slammed into Cyborg, but he changed into a hawk and swooped out of the way, flying at the two. He changed back and grabbed the edge, expecting it to dip forward, but being kicked in the mouth when he discovered that the object didn't budge. While Terra and Naruto flew past them, the green-skinned teen flew off and was caught by Starfire. The man jumped off as Terra flipped the stone they were riding over and flipped off, landing directly next to a half-conscious Robin who was still holding on to his manhood. She raised two big rocks and began to crush the team leader, but Raven appeared and engulfed them in her power. "Don't make me hurt you," the girl growled, her eyes glowing white as she extended a black glowed arm. "Now, there'll be none of that now, little half-blood," Naruto said, scolding her like a child before snatching her wrist and turning her onto her back. "I will be your adversary," he said. Because of this distraction, both Robin and Cyborg were able to recover and attempt to attack simultaneously, while the other larger team did the opposite of an uppercut. Robin kicked high and his leg was caught. Terra used her grip on Robin's leg to steady herself as she planted a firm kick to Cyborg's chest and swung her fist at the back of his head, which he barely avoided but felt go through his hair. With one leg still in the girl's grasp, Robin leapt and kicked with the other, causing her to release him. After a strong blow to the shoulder, he rolled away and clambered to his feet on the street, huffing slightly. Terra turned to face Cyborg, sneered at him, and used her abilities to raise a huge wall of stone between them. Robin glared at the wall and reached for a disc-shaped explosive charge that was designed to concentrate its blast in a single direction. He stuck it to the center and then leapt back as it started to beep, the center pulsing red. The wall behind Terra exploded before she could attack Cyborg, flinging her forward and showering her with fist-sized pieces of stone as she crashed into the street. "Now Cyborg." When the team leader noticed the girl lying on the ground, he yelled. "Sorry kid," said the half-robot as he aimed his sonic cannon. Half of her face and half of her smirk were obscured by her hair as she looked up, and her hand glowed as bright yellow cracks in the ground raced towards the two teenagers and exploded beneath them, sending them both skyward. A young woman was giggling on her coworker's desk in the tall building down the street as he joked and flirted with her, neither of them noticing the two teenagers flying up into the air, while Cyborg disappeared and Robin fell into the building across from them. He said, and I was like, "Chill out, it's not like the sky is falling." Just before they heard a loud crash, the ceiling tiles above his desk broke seconds later, and Cyborg landed on his back right on top of it, shattering it. When Terra was fighting, Raven used her abilities to lift one of the big rocks his partner had used and threw it at him from the side as a distraction while glaring at the blonde man who had attacked her. Now, that wasn't nice, Naruto thought as he stopped close to the wrecked car the Titans had been riding in. "Let's see how you like it," he said, backflipping a few times out of the way to let it pass by and strike a street lamp that buckled under the weight. The boulder still was buried in the roof, but he turned and grabbed it, easily removing it and throwing it at her. Raven used her magic to catch it, but she gasped when the blonde followed suit by throwing the car, and she closed her eyes as its shadow got closer to her and she attempted to stop it. Starfire suddenly materialized, her hands and eyes glimmering with her extraterrestrial power as she caught the wrecked car. Beast Boy, who had been waiting for an opportunity, dropped his attack plan and rushed to the still-downed Raven, helping her up while glancing at the redhead who was still flying and holding the car above them. Before launching a green energy beam from her eyes, Starfire yelled and threw the car as hard as she could at the blonde in the mask. Naruto didn't see this and punched the car as it got closer, but the beam struck and caused it to explode. He was actually thrown back where he struck one of those blue mailboxes, giving his back a dent on the side. Before grinning beneath his mask, he pondered, that tingled. Raven, Beast Boy, and Starfire looked at each other as they watched the blonde get to his feet without any injuries, and then the redhead girl charged first, launching one of her superhuman punches at him. Starfire's eyes widened as she felt her body change direction in midair when Naruto slung her around and straight into the ground with her own arm, causing her to twitch as her upper body dug a trench along the road. Naruto sidestepped her super strong straight and grabbed the arm as it literally flew past his head. When the blonde man heard a loud roar, he turned to see a green grizzly bear swoop down with its enormous clawed paw and jump back just in time to save his neck. However, the beast continued to charge, leaping after him and changing into a giant green ape that repeatedly attacked but was evaded. Unbeknownst to Naruto, Raven's magic engulfed one of the last street lamps and dragged it from the ground, aiming it at their enemy's back in an attempt to capture him while giving Beast Boy time to halt and move so he wouldn't be caught as well. Naruto grunted as the heavy metal pole struck his back and knocked him to the ground, but the pole bent on its own and encircled his entire upper body, including his thighs, like a cocoon. "Awesome. We got him," Beast Boy shouted as he changed back. "I wouldn't count on it," the hooded girl muttered as Raven and the recovered Starfire floated over and stopped beside their teammate. What you mean?" inquired the green bean. The sound of metal twisting and breaking gave him the answer, and he gaped at the sight of the ensnared blonde piercing the metal surrounding him. "Oh, hurry up!" Before observing that Terra had launched her two opponents through the tops of different buildings, Naruto escaped and laughed, saying, "How amusing, but I've still yet to break a sweat, and it would seem that my partner has yet to do so as well," he said. While Robin and Cyborg eventually made it to the ground floor and emerged through the front doors to rush over to the other three Titans, Terra created another floating platform and floated over to him. After giving her a quick glance, Naruto began, "Terra, I'm done with these weaklings, let us go. These five are wastes of time." "You're not leaving." With his collapsible metal bow staff in hand, Robin screamed. Naruto looked at them and hummed, "Pathetic, Terra. Yes, I think it's time for a farewell present. Even though these five are worthless, they should still receive some recognition for their efforts." The girl grinned and said, "I have just the thing." In front of the blonde pair, two massive golems composed of dirt, landlines, asphalt, and pipe exploded from the ground. Standing 8 feet tall and weighing more than 400 pounds, Terra's glowing hands caused the ground to shake and crack even more than before, even passing by the five and causing the three on the ground to stumble. Raven paled and shuddered. That power was different, almost demonic, and it felt like hers. "Oh shit," Beast Boy said, summarizing their thoughts as the two golems plunged into the cracked earth with remarkable speed for something so big.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.